Chapter 354. Preposterous. Dragon Cheng Wuji said, "Wuyo, put down your weapon." In Lu Yi, there was a power that did not belong to the emperor. That was the sacred lake. As a goddess, Huazhou Wuyo had many followers of the sacred lake. These people were not restricted by Dragon Cheng Wuji. Hence, when Dragon Cheng Wuji gave the order, the women did not move. Instead, they looked at Huazhou Wuyo. At this moment, Huazhou Wuyo was dressed in a white robe. She looked coldly at Gong Yimo. "King, the Cha heir family has been exterminated." "What?" Dragon Cheng Wuji was stunned. Then he rushed down from the golden stage. He grabbed Huazhou Wuyo's shoulders and asked again in disbelief, "What did you say?" "Old Cha heir, he's dead," Huazhou Wuyo said coldly. "How? That's impossible." Half a month ago, old Cha heir came to thank him. He said that his people would not have to worry about winter. It was all thanks to him and Dai Yu State's princess. Why would Huazhou Wuyo suddenly say something like that? It's all because of her. Huazhou Wuyo pointed at Gong Yimo. "The things she taught us to plant are poisonous. That's why the Cha heir family was exterminated. Not only that, the other tribes are also showing signs of being poisoned." "King, she's here to harm us." Dragon Cheng Wuji was confused by old Cha heir's death. However, he still shook his head. "That's impossible. There's no poison. I tried it myself." "King, why don't you come with me to take a look?" Huazhou Wuyo saw that Dragon Cheng Wuji trusted Gong Yimo. She couldn't help but mock him. Gong Yimo, who had just watched a good show, slowly walked down the stage. The other party had come prepared. She had no choice but to take the bait. "Dragon Cheng Wuji, let's go take a look." She sighed. She didn't understand why these people kept making things difficult for her. Dragon Cheng Wuji was stunned. Old Cha heir had helped him a lot. How he wished that this was fake news. So after hearing Gong Yimo's words, he hurriedly led everyone at the banquet out of the city. However, reality slapped him hard in the face. "Dead? Really? All dead?" Dragon City Limitless walked in. The once bustling tribe was now dead silent. The ground was littered with corpses. All of them had died horribly. He hurriedly rushed into the main tent and saw old Cha heir lying on the ground. The entire tent was in a mess. There was a large silver pot on the ground and broken tea bowls all over the floor. From this, one could see how much he had struggled before he died and how much pain he had suffered. Long Cheng Wuji's eyes were bloodshot, the veins on his forehead popping out. He clenched his fists so hard that his knuckles cracked. Who was it? Who did all of this? He wanted to help Cha heir up, but it was useless. The Cha heir who had told him stories about eagles and encouraged him to grow up was already dead. What he did not tell Gong Yimo was that Cha heir's youngest son had died because Cha heir had given him all the food that was meant for his youngest son when there was a food shortage. When he asked Cha heir why he did that, he said that rather than both of them starving to death, it was better to save one. "Wuji, you are the hope of the entire Lu Yi." He still remembered how sincere Cha heir was when he said that, and how decisively he had given up on his son. However, he was already dead. At this moment, a child's cry woke him up. No one dared to speak as they watched him rush into the neighboring tent like a madman. Then he carried out a child. This child was sleeping just now and had just woken up. After crying twice, Long Cheng Wuji held him in his arms, and he stopped crying. He looked at Long Cheng Wuji with a pair of watery eyes and a finger in his mouth. He was cute and didn't know anything about the world. He didn't know that his people were all dead. What happened? His voice was very soft, as if he was afraid of scaring the child in his arms. However, the anger in his voice was tangible, as if it could burn everything. It was like a mountain pressing down on everyone in front of him. Huazhou Wuyo suddenly laughed coldly. "It's all because of her." She pointed at Gong Yimo, who was also shocked by Cha heir's death, and said loudly, "The thing she brought is poisonous. They all died because they ate the poisonous fruit." "Nonsense," some of the officials who came along said. They had all eaten the potatoes and none of them had died from the poison. "Where's the evidence?" Long Cheng Wuji looked at Huazhou Wuyo. He only wanted evidence. At this moment, Flower Boat Wuyo clapped her hands and two people walked out from behind her. They were carrying baskets of potatoes, which were obviously stored in the Cha Air tribe. However, most of them had spoiled, and some had sprouted and could no longer be eaten. This is only a part of it. Hua Zhou scoffed. Bring him up. Once she finished speaking, someone dragged a burly man who was dressed like a farmer. When he saw so many important people present, he quickly lowered his head. Hua Zhou asked, "Tell me, did Gong Yimo say that these fruits are poisonous?" That person looked at Hua Zhou in surprise, but was quickly frightened by her gaze. He trembled and said, "Yes. The Princess of Daiyu State said it herself that the sprouted potatoes can't be eaten because they're poisonous." Gong Yimo had told many people about this before. It was common knowledge. Hua Zhou laughed coldly. "But she didn't tell you how poisonous they are, right?" The burly man didn't dare to speak. He looked at the corpses on the ground and was shocked. Could it be that these people had all died from eating the sprouted fruits? That was too scary. Seeing that, Longqing Wuji still didn't believe her. Hua Zhou ordered someone to bring a sheep over and forced it to eat the spoiled potatoes in the basket. The sheep was unwilling, and in the end, it only ate a few mouthfuls before it foamed at the mouth and died. It scared everyone present. They wouldn't eat the sprouted potatoes. After all, they could be used to make seeds. This was because they were now using all kinds of things to make greenhouses. They weren't limited to planting 2 seasons a year. Therefore, they didn't know that sprouted potatoes could poison people to death. That was too scary. Fortunately, they found out about it now. Otherwise, when it was popularized throughout the country and they had no food to eat, they would definitely eat it regardless of whether it was spoiled or sprouted. When that time came, wouldn't the country be destroyed? At this moment, the way they looked at Gong Yimo was very scary. She had only casually said that there was poison, but she didn't say how strong the poison was. Wasn't she deliberately harming people? From this, one could see how ambitious he was. With this thought, many people stood further away from Gong Yimo. This woman had a vicious heart. They didn't expect her to do such a thing. To think that they were so grateful to her. She killed people without shedding a drop of blood. Didn't they see that she had wiped out an entire tribe in an instant? Chapter 355. Gong Yimo found it hilarious. When potatoes rotted or sprouted, they would produce poison, but the poison was not strong at all. Besides, it wasn't a disaster year. Gong Yimo couldn't think of any reason for the entire tribe to eat sprouted fruits. However, Chair's family had already died out. No one had told her the reason. "You're going to convict me just like that?" Gong Yimo's light tone was very hateful at this moment. However, she didn't care. She had to vent her anger. "I said this thing is poisonous. It is poisonous, but the toxicity is very small. It won't kill anyone." She pointed at Cha Air's corpse in the main tent. They were clearly poisoned by something else. "It has nothing to do with potatoes." "How do you prove it?" Hua Zhou smiled and lightly kicked the dead sheep beside his feet as he said in a deep voice, "Right now, this poisonous plant is only grown in Huacheng. It hasn't been popularized yet. Look, not far from here is the Cha Air tribe's new plantation. If you think that the seeds in this basket are poisoned, you can also pick up a germinated seed and eat it. As long as you eat it, I will believe that you are innocent." Many people felt that it made sense. The main reason was that Lu Yi was very weak in medicine. When they fell sick, most of them had to endure through it. They didn't have much medicine to eat, not to mention poison and detoxification. Moreover, Lu Yi was a simple person. Food was so precious. It was impossible that someone would poison something just to harm others. Therefore, they felt that if Gong Yimo said that she was innocent, then eating a sprouted fruit would prove that it was normal. However, they didn't think that someone would be so ruthless. They were afraid that there wasn't a single fruit in the entire Chair tribe that wasn't poisonous. At this moment, another group of people came. From afar, they could hear the sound of someone crying. The curtain of the main tent was pulled open. It was a group of familiar people. Longqing Ting Shui glared at Gong Yimo, then angrily walked in front of Longqing Wuji. "Brother, many of our people are sick. Come and take a look." Longqing Wuji was shocked. He quickly walked out of the main tent. Everyone followed him out. However, they all subconsciously kept a distance from Gong Yimo. It was as if she was some kind of plague. Sure enough, a lot of people were sick. Longqing Wuji looked around and saw that there were over 1,000 people who were sick. Everyone's face was pale and looked very scary. They looked at Gong Yimo with complicated expressions. Some of them even had resentment. What's going on? With so many Lu Ye's people in trouble, Longqing Wuji's pain could be imagined. He could only feel his entire heart trembling. He could not believe that all of this was real. Longqing's Ting Shui smiled proudly and pulled a random person forward. You say it. Why are you in pain? The woman looked at Longqing Wuji timidly. She had no choice. His face was so dark that it was scary. The baby had already been handed over to someone else. So he did not suppress his anger at all and let it all out. I don't know, she said weakly. I didn't eat much. I just ate the fruit of the earth every day. Many Luyi people called potatoes the fruit of the earth. Longqing Wuji did not believe her and quickly walked over to the others. These people were being supported by the guards, and their faces were all pale. Tell me, what's wrong with you? Longqing Wuji's hand grabbed a sick man's collar. His voice was suppressed, making the man's hair stand up. He said with a sobbing tone, I just ate a lot of the fruit of the earth. Today, I suddenly had diarrhea. Longqing Wuji angrily let go of him and did not care that he fell to the ground and asked the others. But the answer he got was the same, that they did not eat anything. They only ate potatoes, and they ate a lot of them. After all, they still felt that it was fresh, but they did not expect that they would suddenly vomit, diarrhea, and stomach pain. Gong Yimo then knew that in order to frame her, the other party had spent a lot of money. At the same time, she felt sad. She wanted to do good, but these people, for their own selfish reasons, harmed her like this. At this moment, a woman suddenly ran out in pain. In the end, she fell to the ground. But the gaze she looked at Gong Yimo with was indescribable hatred. It's all because of you. You used the evil fruit to harm people. My husband is dead. You caused his death. Her voice seemed to have broken the vent. As many people started to curse at Gong Yimo, she was immediately isolated. In the huge, open space of the tribe, no one stood by her side. As for Si Kong and the rest, because she was leaving tomorrow, they had already gone to prepare their luggage. At this moment, they probably did not know that Gong Yimo was being harmed, and the other party was so ruthless, it was very likely that Si Kong and the rest had also been harmed. In the midst of so many noisy voices, Longqing Wuji had already given up. At this moment, he stood in the crowd, silently turned back to look at Gong Yimo, his eyes staring at her, as if he was possessed. At this moment, Huazhou Weiyo seemed to have suddenly realized something and said, So the fruit itself is poisonous. It's just that before it rots, the toxicity is small, but once it germinates, the toxicity is very strong. I mean, how can there be such a perfect food in this world, resistant to dryness and cold, ripening quickly, and high yield, so it's actually poisonous? Her words received everyone's silent approval. As she spoke, she smiled at Gong Yimo. Everyone says that you're noble, but I didn't expect your heart to be rotten to the core. Ting Shui, and I only offended you a little. And you want to take revenge on the entire Luyi? How scary. How can a woman like you deserve to be a princess? Huazhou Weiyo's words represented faith, and when she said this, everyone felt that it was reasonable, and more than half of them actually believed her. No one thought that Gong Yimo would be the one to prove herself. She didn't even want to eat to prove her innocence, so they wouldn't defend her. Who asked her to be a citizen of the Daiyu state, and now she was plotting to harm the entire Luyi. This might be the Daiyu state's conspiracy. Many people thought with certainty. Longqing Wuji also did not think that someone would be so ruthless as to poison the entire tribe's fruits in order to frame Gong Yimo. After all, the manpower needed to do this was extraordinary. He still underestimated women's hearts. So at this moment, he suddenly walked towards the plantation and picked up a sprouted fruit. He walked towards Gong Yimo step by step. At this moment, his eyes were red and his veins were popping out. Obviously, he was agitated by the continuous deaths of his tribesmen, and he was extremely angry. He looked at Gong Yimo with a complicated expression. Old Cha-Air's death made him unable to think, and he only wanted to prove it. He thought that as long as Gong Yimo ate it, he would believe her. Looking at his big hand reaching in front of her eyes, Gong Yimo's face was gloomy, and she did not say anything. This was Lu Yi, and her excuses were useless. She could only take out evidence, but the furious Lu Yi people would not give her a chance to prove herself. Eat! His tone was stiff, and that one word made his throat tighten. He almost crushed the fruit in his hand. Chapter 356. Gong Yimo looked down at his hand. At this time, his hand was still stained with dirt, and a small sprouted potato was in his hand. She sneered. Even if it wasn't poisoned, she wouldn't eat it. Seeing her smile, Long Chengwuji only felt pain in his heart. Cha-Air's family was wiped out, and more than 1,000 people were sick. It probably accounted for half of the people who promoted the tribe. So many people had problems after eating it. Even if he did not believe that it was Gong Yimo's doing, other than that, what other explanation could there be? These were all people who gave up nomadism, gave up freedom, and submitted to Hua Chung, submitted to him. He really could not understand who would hate them so much. Their deaths and injuries were as painful as cutting off Long Chengwuji's flesh. If this was really done by Gong Yimo, then he who trusted Gong Yimo was the real sinner. So he must let Gong Yimo eat it. He must let her prove herself in front of everyone. Eat it, he said again. Gong Yimo looked up at him. I won't eat it. This thing is obviously poisoned. Yeah, she snorted. It turned out that the angry Long Chengwuji pushed Gong Yimo. He was very strong, and Gong Yimo was not prepared. She was pushed to the ground by Long Chengwuji. His ears were filled with the sound of his clansmen cursing Gong Yimo, and there were also the sad and disappointed cries. Every sound was like a catalyst, provoking Long Chengwuji's nerves. Why was he disappointed? It was supposed to be a joyous harvest, and after this harvest, it would be promoted to the whole country. Lu Yi would not have to endure the cold winter and hunger anymore. But he did not expect that after spending half a year of manpower and resources, it was all a conspiracy in the end. It was all fake. Long Chengwuji was so angry that he could not think. He squatted down and lifted Gong Yimo's chin. His face was tense. In addition to the pressure in his tone, there was also a trace of grief and pleading. Eat it, and I will believe you. Gong Yimo slapped away the thing in his hand and looked at him stubbornly. I won't eat it. I'm not wrong. Give me a chance. I can prove myself. Zunk. The treasured saber was suddenly unsheathed. In the next moment, the cold blade was pointed at the tip of Gong Yimo's nose. Layers of murderous intent. Gong Yimo could not help but raise her head. The moment she raised her head, she saw the coldness, pain, and murderous intent in his eyes. All of this is really because of you. His voice suddenly became very calm, but the things that were suppressed behind his back were too heavy, causing everyone around him to quiet down. However, their eyes, whether filled with hatred or grief, fell on Gong Yimo. At this moment, everyone was standing opposite of Gong Yimo. People from Lu Yi and people from Daiyu State. Gong Yimo suppressed her anger and did not make a move. She hoped that Long Chengwuji could still retain a trace of rationality and not sentence her to death in his rage. Limitless Dragon City, please calm down. Could it be that you won't even give me a chance to prove myself? I have given you too many chances. He suddenly interrupted Gong Yimo's words with a sorrowful expression. If I had seen through you earlier, Cha-Air family would not have been exterminated. This is all my fault, and now, I want to correct this mistake. As he spoke, his eyes widened, and the saber in his hand actually chopped down towards Gong Yimo. At that moment, Gong Yimo's heart ached. He still did not believe her. At the same time, her eyes flashed with a trace of anger, and she reached out her hand to counterattack. But at this moment of imminent peril, Long Chengwuji's broad blade was actually blocked by a narrow sword that was suffused with a bright light. Gong Yimo looked up in surprise. She did not expect it to be Gong Dai. She had never seen Gong Dai so angry before. His eyes seemed to contain the fire of hell. His gaze seemed to be able to burn anyone's soul. With a forceful flick, he pushed Longqing Wuji a few steps away. Royal sister. He pulled Gong Yimo up and hugged her tightly in his arms. God knows that when he arrived in Huacheng, he felt that something was wrong when he saw the chaos and quickly rushed over with the others. Just now, when he saw someone trying to stab Gong Yimo with a saber, his heart almost stopped. At that moment, heaven and earth were silent. He definitely could not bear the consequences of being stabbed by that saber. Gong Yimo was hugged tightly in Gong Dai's arms and was still in a daze. She knew that the matter of the three countries' horse ranch had basically been settled, and they were just waiting to sit down and discuss further. She thought that Daiyu State would at most send a minister to discuss this matter. She was preparing to return to her country and did not expect Gong Dai to bring a team over. He had so many things to do in the country. How could he leave? Longqing Wuji was shocked as well. He did not expect that Daiyu State would send Gong Dai over just to discuss the matter of the three countries' horse ranch. But at this moment, seeing Gong Dai hugging Gong Yimo so tightly, he understood that they did not send Gong Dai over, but Gong Dai himself. Seeing the two of them hugging each other tightly, Longqing Wuji felt that his originally burning anger had been stoked even more. But soon, a series of orderly footsteps were heard. It turned out that Gong Dai's men had arrived. A total of 2,000 people were facing off against Lu Ye's men. Among them were many innocent citizens of Lu Yi who were panicking. Gong Dai, don't forget, this is Lu Yi. Longqing Wuji was angry and shouted loudly. Gong Dai hugged Gong Yimo tightly with one hand and pointed his narrow sword at Longqing Wuji. His pair of cold eyes were filled with murderous intent. Although they were in another territory, his aura did not back down at all. Anyone who harms Royal Sister is my enemy. The two of them faced off. Many people were panicking, such as Hua Zhou Wuyo. She had been captured by Gong Dai once and knew how powerful Gong Dai was. If today's matter was exposed, then she did not dare to imagine what would happen to her if she did not successfully kill Gong Yimo. So in order to break the stalemate, she waved her hand and ordered her men to move. Nearly 100 women in white charged towards the imperial guards brought by Gong Dai. Their swords were swinging without mercy. Her original intention was that if Gong Dai's men killed someone, she would take the opportunity to provoke a fight between the two sides. In the end, who would want to look into her problems when they were blinded by killing? At that time, it would not be a family fight but a national fight. However, she had underestimated Gong Ju. Because Gong Ju didn't issue any orders, his men were able to effortlessly capture more than 100 women alive. The weapon in the woman's hand fell to the ground with clanking sounds. The martial arts of the two sides were clearly not on the same level, so the people of Dragon City Wuji didn't even have time to kill until their eyes turned red. They were intimidated by the other side's martial arts and became serious and cautious. At this time, Longqing Wuji finally sobered up. He knew why Gong Dai was here. He could not help but think deeply. Even if the new species was a conspiracy, could it be that the horse ranch of the Three Kingdoms was also a conspiracy? But the benefits of this made him unable to think of any conspiracy. So after he calmed down, he suddenly thought, could it be that he had wronged Gong Yimo? But how could that be? Chapter 357. In the stalemate, Gong Yimo glanced at Gong Dai, then harumphed coldly. Can I defend myself now? Her tone was light, but the anger in it was no less than Longqing Wuji's. If Gong Dai did not come, she would have held Longqing Wuji hostage and forcefully proved herself. But Gong Dai was here, which saved her a lot of effort. Gong Yimo's somewhat hoarse voice inexplicably made Longqing Wuji feel guilty. He was a little scared. If Gong Yimo really proved herself, then how was he going to face her? So he remained silent and did not speak. But his silence did not mean that the others were silent. Longqing Ting Shui angrily said, "What else is there to say? We have evidence and witnesses. So, what if you're from Daiyu State? You've harmed so many of my people, Lu Yi, and you still want to escape unscathed?" Huh? Evidence and witnesses? Gong Yimo smiled and patted Gong Dai's hand comfortingly. Then she left Gong Dai's embrace and walked in front of the others. She coldly said to Longqing Wuji, "I'm going to prove myself now. Follow me." As she spoke, she walked towards the tent next to the main tent. Longqing Wuji hurriedly followed. Huazhou Wuyo and the others also followed because of their guilty conscience. At this moment, Gong Dai was outside. Sikong had already run in and knelt in front of him. "Your Highness, this subordinate is incompetent. I was entangled by someone just now. Your Highness, please punish me." Gong Dai really wanted to kill him, but he would be worried if the royal sister could not see him. So even if he was unwilling, he still coldly said, "Go and receive 50 strikes of the rod." Sikong was delighted. "Thank you, Your Highness." After he left, Gong Dai called Lo Qi and coldly ordered, "Seal off all directions. No one is allowed to leave." Yes, Lo Qi obeyed. He thought that touching the princess was the same as touching the prince's reverse scale. He even felt that if something really happened to Lu Yi, the Daiyu state would definitely go to war with Lu Yi. Gong Dai said a few more words and then walked into the tent. He wanted to protect the royal sister. These people couldn't tell right from wrong. They were too annoying. A large group of people surrounded the tent. But when Gong Dai came in, even though he came in alone, everyone unconsciously made way for him, allowing him to effortlessly walk to Gong Yimo's side. "What do you want this prince to see?" Longqing Wuji coldly asked. Just a moment ago, he had found the baby here. He wanted to see what Gong Yimo was going to do. Gong Yimo scanned the room, and her eyes lit up when she saw something. She walked over and picked up a porcelain bowl. Sure enough, there was still a small bowl of something mushy inside, but she didn't know what it was. "Take a look. What is this?" Longqing Wuji looked and even dipped a little into his mouth to taste it. Although it was bland and tasteless, he quickly knew that it was the taste of potatoes. It was just that someone had made it into a mushy state. In other words, this baby was also feeding on this poisonous fruit. Gong Yimo promptly said, "If it's as a certain someone said, potatoes are poisonous, then why isn't this child poisoned?" Huazhou Wuyo's back was covered in cold sweat. "Perhaps it's because he didn't eat much, so the poison is shallow." "Is that so?" Gong Yimo looked at her and smiled meaningfully. "If a baby can resist the poison, then it's really strange that an adult can't. Since that's the case, follow me." They entered the main tent again. In the main tent, old Cha Air's corpse was still there. No one had touched it, and no one had cleaned up the broken pieces on the ground. Gong Yimo said, "Don't you find it strange? Why are there so many broken bowls on the ground? It's as if they all drank something together when they were alive." Also, old Cha Air's tribe mostly used coarse sandstone bowls. "I really want to know, where did this silver pot come from?" As she spoke, she picked up an empty silver pot on the ground. This was something that Huazhou Wuyo had never expected. She was born in the wealthy Huazhou family and had lived a life of luxury since young. How could she know what ordinary people lived like? How could she know that the leader of a tribe was so poor that even a silver pot was so conspicuous? Moreover, she was very nervous at that time. She saw that everyone was dead and in a rush for time. She didn't even notice that there was something wrong with the silver pot on the ground. But now that it was picked up by someone, she realized how strange it was. Just as she was racking her brains to find an explanation for this silver pot, everyone suddenly exclaimed. It was Gong Yimo. She actually tore the small pot open with her bare hands. Then with her hands, she flipped the inside of the pot. The silver pot made a cracking sound. How much strength did she have? There was definitely nothing in the pot. But when she flipped it open, everyone saw a shocking scene. That was the inside of the silver pot was black. This kind of black made people think that it was a silver needle testing for poison. It was the same logic. Huazhou Wuyo's entire body was trembling slightly. Even if someone found this pot, they would only look to see if there was any liquid in the pot. Who would directly open the pot to look inside? This was simply too shocking. She had to think of a countermeasure. A countermeasure. Longqing Wuji stared blankly at the silver pot. Finally, his gaze fell on Huazhou Wuyo's forced calm face. At this time, Gong Yimo faintly said, "Let's make a hypothesis. Okay, there's a very sacred thing in this silver pot. Everyone wants it. No, everyone wants to drink it. That's why there are so many coarse tea bowls. Everyone is rewarded with a bowl, and everyone drinks it gratefully. And that baby fell asleep. The person who brought this thing here felt that a baby would not know anything. So he let him go. Hence, everyone who drank it died. But the baby who ate the mashed potatoes was fine. At this time, Gong Yimo suddenly looked at Hua Zhou Wuyo with lightning-like eyes. I wonder what kind of water is so sacred in Lu Yi. Obtaining it as a gift? Only sacred water. Seeing Hua Zhou Wuyo was so frightened that she did not know what to do, Long Ting Shui hurriedly sneered. Stop quibbling. Don't tell me you still want to push the blame to Sister Wuyo. She is Lu Ye's goddess. She is Lu Ye's faith. You think you can defame her with just a few words? Even if you are right, then what about those people outside? There are more than 1,000 people outside. Don't tell me they all drank the sacred water? Stop joking. Gong Yimo twirled a strand of her hair. I don't need to know the process of them being poisoned, right? She looked at Longqing Wuji and sneered. I only need to prove that the mashed potatoes are not poisonous. But if my methods are too extreme, I hope that King Lu Yi will forgive me. Chapter 358. When she said this, many people in the crowd panicked. If she followed Long Ting Shui's words and proved that she had nothing to do with the poisoning of the 1,000 people, then they would still have a lot of loopholes to exploit. But if Gong Yimo directly proved that the potatoes were not poisonous, then the 1,000 people's illness would not be her responsibility, but Long Wuji's investigation. Then why did they go through so much trouble and scheme? For what? At this moment, Long Wuji's heart had already turned cold. He had a premonition that this matter might not be Gong Yimo's doing. But if it was not her doing, then it was Lu Ye's people who harmed themselves. This ending was even harder for him to accept. All right. His voice was heavy, as if from the moment Gong Dai appeared, he seemed to have been drained of all his energy, leaving only emptiness. He looked at Gong Yimo. As long as you can prove that the fruits are not poisonous, then you are innocent. Gong Yimo smiled. It's a promise. King, please send someone to the Cha Air tribe cellar and bring some fruits over. Long Wu Ji nodded. Very quickly, someone brought over a basket of potatoes. These were mostly in good condition. Obviously, they had been carefully stored. Then Gong Yimo walked to the front of the bamboo basket and reached into it, then took out a sprouted potato. Everyone thought that she had taken it out from the basket, but in reality, she had taken it out from her space. But no one would know. Hua Zhou Wuyo was originally very nervous, but now seeing that Gong Yimo wanted to use this method to prove herself, she could not help but laugh. She had poisoned the entire Cha Air tribe's fruits. No matter if it was good, bad, or in the ground, there was not a single one that was not poisonous. The small bowl of muddy soup that the baby had eaten was already her miscalculation. She could guarantee that there would not be any problems with the rest. As long as Gong Yimo ate it, she would definitely die. Anyway, as long as Gong Yimo died, it did not matter whether she was innocent or not. But would Gong Yimo let her off so easily? She held the potato in her hand and walked in front of Hua Zhou Wuyo, asking her, "You're saying that all fruits are poisonous. It's just that the ones that haven't sprouted are less poisonous, while the ones that have sprouted are more poisonous, right?" At this moment, Flower Boat Worryless was in a difficult position. How could she say no? So she nodded. Gong Emo smiled. Then, are you saying these words in your own name, or do you represent the position of the Hua Zhou family, or the position of the Sacred Lake? On this point, Hua Zhou Wuyo did not dare to speak carelessly. However, if she did not say anything, it would make her seem guilty. She gritted her teeth and said, "As a goddess, I say this conclusion. This fruit is clearly poisonous." Very good. Gong Yimo smiled with satisfaction. Does that mean that if I didn't die after eating it, it means that you're lying and someone is framing you? Hua Zhou Wuyo was afraid that she would play tricks and hesitated. Gong Yimo continued, "Or you can eat it. I guarantee that you won't die." "You would definitely die?" Hua Zhou Wuyo's face darkened. "Yes, as long as you eat it and don't die. I'll take it that you're right." She did not believe that Gong Yimo was immune to poison. Gong Yimo smiled and crushed the potato in her hand. Then, she pinched the clean part in the middle and ate it. She really ate it. Longqing Wuji wanted to stop her, but he did not know what reason to use. He could only stare at her. At this moment, he was so afraid that something would happen to her. Hua Zhou Wuyo saw her eat it with her own eyes. There was no mistake. However, eating a little was not enough for her. She continued to slowly eat the crushed part in the middle of the potato. Her every action seemed to tickle Hua Zhou Wuyo's nerves. She really ate it, but nothing happened to her. How was that possible? Hua Zhou Wuyo walked over to the basket of fruits in disbelief. Could it be that these did not belong to the Cha heir family? She reached out and picked one up as if to check it out. At this moment, Gong Yimo appeared behind her like a ghost. Are you curious why I didn't die? She lowered her voice and said this behind Hua Zhou Wuyo. Her voice was faint, as if it came from the abyss of hell. Hua Zhou Wuyo was shocked and was about to speak. Gong Yimo suddenly grabbed her hand and stuffed the fruit in her hand into her mouth. This action frightened everyone. Many people stood up to question Gong Yimo. What are you doing? Gong Yimo fiercely restrained Hua Zhou Wuyo, who was struggling with all her might. She did not move, but Gong Dai had already stood in front of Gong Yimo. At this moment, he swung his sword and smiled coldly. If Royal Sister can eat it, why can't she eat it? Everyone, if you take another step forward, this king will make his blood splatter on the spot. Gong Dai's voice was filled with pressure. It actually forced those who wanted to save Hua Zhou Wuyo to retreat. Longqing Wuji did not move as he watched Hua Zhou Wuyo cry for help with tears in her eyes. As for Gong Yimo, her eyes were lowered as she forcefully stuffed the fruit into Hua Zhou Wuyo's mouth. She did not let up. Why won't you eat it? She saw her clench her teeth and could not help but find it funny. You won't eat it because it's poisonous. You know what kind of poison it is, right? Hua Zhou Wuyo was being restrained by Gong Yimo from behind. Her mouth was being stuffed with Gong Yimo's other hand, so she could not speak. This poison was very strong. If she ate a little, she would die. She did not want to die. She was Lu Ye's future princess, so her tears kept falling. At this moment, she was scared to death. Her tears fell onto the back of Gong Yimo's hand, but Gong Yimo did not let up on forcing Hua Zhou Wuyo to eat. Her eyes were filled with ruthlessness. She wanted nothing more than to poison Hua Zhou Wuyo to death. Hearing her sobs, Hua Zhou Wuyo's father, Hua Zhou Yi, was very worried. But with Gong Dai around, he did not dare to go forward. At this moment, he really wished that his son was here. He would definitely save his sister. After playing enough, Gong Yimo finally let go. She let go, and Hua Zhou Wuyo fell to the ground. Then, she quickly removed the thing from her mouth and vomited nonstop. Actually, she did not eat it at all, but she was afraid. That was a poison that could kill once it came into contact with blood. At this moment, Gong Yimo was also a little tired. She sneered at Longqing Wuji and said, "All right, I'm not playing anymore. Let me tell you the truth." She pointed at Hua Zhou Wuyo. She refused to eat it because she poisoned all the fruits in the Cha heir tribe. Otherwise, why would she be so shocked when I ate it? If I made her eat it again, it would be like asking for her life. Gong Yimo laughed mockingly, but I know of a place that she must have forgotten to poison. When she said this, even Hua Zhou Wuyo was stunned. At this moment, she could still argue that the Cha heir tribe's fruits were poisonous because of the soil. It had nothing to do with her. But if Gong Yimo found a non-poisonous fruit in the Cha heir tribe, then she was dead meat. No way. She had poisoned everything. Even the ones in the ground were not spared. Even Longqing Wuji did not believe it. If someone had really poisoned them, would they have let any fish escape the net? Gong Yimo laughed, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. She spoke in a low voice like a demon. I taught them to eat potatoes without the skin. This is the principle of making the best use of everything. I think, in the food trough of the Cha heir tribe's cattle and sheep, you will definitely find the skin of the uneaten fruit. When that time comes, you will realize that all the fruits in the tribe are poisonous, but the skin of the animals is not. That will be very interesting. Chapter 359. It was interesting, but some people's hearts turned to ashes because of Gong Yimo's words. Gong Yimo clapped her hands. I'm done with my work. As for the evidence and the 1,000 people outside, that's your problem, Lu Yi. When the time comes, I hope King Lu Yi will clear my name. Long Qingting Shui wanted to cause trouble after hearing this. How was the 1,000 people outside not Gong Yimo's responsibility? She had yet to prove that she had nothing to do with their illness. But before she could open her mouth, she was stunned by her brother's gaze. She had never seen Long Qingting Wu Ji so scary. He was even scarier than the last time she killed 1,000 people. So all her words were stuck in Long Qingting Wu Ji's throat. Gong Yimo saw this and sneered in her heart. It was time for them to settle their family matters. As an outsider, she shouldn't be a hindrance. Seeing Gong Yimo leave, Long Qingting Wu Ji also left with an ashen face. The results of the evidence were the same as what Gong Yimo had said. In the livestock's food trough, there was indeed fruit skin. The livestock were fine after eating it, so it wasn't poisonous. This was really a shameful farce. So when the large group of people walked back, most of them didn't look good. They were still chatting and laughing at the banquet in the afternoon, but now they were all feeling guilty. They walked towards the palace. Gong Yimo and Gong Dai were guests from Daiyu State, so they definitely had to stay in the palace. As for the ministers, none of them dared to leave. Didn't they see that the king's face was so gloomy? Hua Zhouyo walked at the back of the group with a pale face. Seeing the 1,000 people who were poisoned being brought to the palace, his heart thumped, and he became even more afraid. At this moment, someone suddenly stretched out his hand to grab Gong Yimo. Before anyone could react, Gong Dai had already blocked the person with his sword. It was a short old man with white hair. He was very surprised to be blocked, but the moment he saw Gong Yimo, he was stunned. He was clearly stunned. He opened his mouth and unconsciously spat out 2 words. Although others didn't hear it from the shape of his mouth, people could tell that it was Xuelian. And Xuelian, wasn't that the name of her cheap mother? Gong Yimo widened her eyes and stopped Gong Dai. At the same time, except for King Lu Yi, everyone present knelt down. Even King Lu Yi cupped his fists in greeting. Greetings to the holy ancestor. As soon as he said this, Gong Yimo knew who this person was. He was the guardian of Lu Ye's people. But from his facial features, he didn't look like he was from Lu Yi. Moreover, he was from her clan, her chief. She was a clansman. Gong Yimo pondering. Similarly, Gong Ju was also surprised. He naturally noticed that Gong Ju called out the name Xuelian. Isn't that his sister's mother? Similar. They were too similar. Xuezhan couldn't describe his current feelings. He watched Xuelian grow up and naturally knew what she looked like when she was 17 or 18 years old. But when he thought of her identity, Xuezhan was shocked. Don't panic. This matter needs to be discussed with the clansmen. Therefore, he looked away after looking at Gong Yimo for a while and said to Long Qingwuji, "The Holy Lake already knows about today's matter. As a goddess, Flowerboat Wuyo has done such a thing. This old man wants to bring her back to be punished. I hope that King Lu Yi can make things easy for us." Long Qingwuji glanced at Hua Zhouyo. Hua Zhouyo was a member of the Holy Lake, and indeed, the Holy Lake had the right to punish him. However, his action of grabbing Gong Yimo made Long Qingwuji feel that Xuezhan was biased, so he sneered. Sure, but Flowerboat Wuyo has committed a heinous crime. She should be punished severely. I hope the Holy Lake will deal with her impartially. His words made Xuezhan's expression freeze for a moment. Flowerboat Wuyo was shocked. She didn't expect Long Qingwuji to say something like this. If she was punished severely, wouldn't she lose the right to be a goddess? Without the halo of a goddess, she was just an ordinary 4th daughter of the Flowerboat family. How could she marry Long Qingwuji? Xuezhan swallowed his anger and nodded. Then, he looked at Flowerboat Wuyo seriously and said, "You will be punished severely." As he spoke, he left with Flowerboat Wuyo and the girl she brought. Gong Yimo looked at his back and pondered. She tolerated the sneak attack because there was something strange about it. She didn't meet anyone related to Xuelian in her previous life. Why did she meet her in this life? In line with the principle of less trouble is better than more trouble, she didn't care. She also appeased Gong Ju, who was very angry with Shuizhan. Gong Yimo wasn't interested to know how Long Chengwuji would deal with his sister. She drank in the afternoon and was tormented by all kinds of things. There was also the matter of Shuizhan. All she wanted now was to have a good sleep. However, there was someone who made it impossible for her to sleep. Gong Dai reached out to poke her hair and pinch her face. It was as if he was playing with an interesting toy. Gong Yimo closed her eyes and pretended to sleep. However, how could she fall asleep? She opened her eyes and stared at him. Gong Dai, you're tired from the journey. Don't you want to rest? His dark eyes lit up. Yes. As he spoke, he lay down beside her and stared at her. Damn, how could she fall asleep like this? Just as Gong Yimo wanted to chase him away, Gong Dai's eyes suddenly darkened. Royal sister, don't you miss me at all? We haven't seen each other for almost half a year. Why aren't you excited to see me? Gong Yimo was sad. She wasn't excited. However, she wouldn't tell Gong Ju how surprised she was when he suddenly appeared in front of her. She also wouldn't tell him that when she was held tightly in Gong Ju's arms, she was also confused for a moment. She shouldn't have. She wrapped herself in the quilt with grief and indignation and began to reflect on herself. Royal sister, Gong Dai pried open Gong Yimo, who was curled up like an ostrich, and forced her to look into his eyes. For so many days and nights, he missed her so much. How could he allow her to ignore him? What's so interesting about sleeping? Look at me. In front of Gong Yimo, Gong Dai would always put on a cold and serious face and softly say embarrassing things. It was totally different from how he was in front of others. The weather seemed to be hot all of a sudden. Gong Dai's palms were separated by a thin layer of clothes, and he could almost burn her skin. What's so nice about you? Being shaken by Gong Dai on the bed like a cat, Gong Yimo couldn't pretend to be an ostrich anymore and asked fiercely. She even opened her eyes wide to take a look. However, she really felt that Gong Dai was different. He was taller, slimmer, and his facial features were more defined. He looked exactly the same as the devilish him in her previous life. However, in this life his temperament was like bamboo. Most of the time, he was cold and cheerless. He would only show some gentleness when he looked at her. Just a little bit of gentleness was enough to drown a person. Do I look good? He asked. Chapter 360. Seeing that Gong Yimo was in a daze, he couldn't help but smile. This smile was truly deadly. It was like ice and snow melting bit by bit under the warm sunlight, reflecting sparkling and translucent colors. This was the rhythm of completely overshadowing Jin Yuna. It's not nice. She dishonestly turned her face and faced Gong Dai with her butt. Her hands unconsciously covered her face, and her heart started to beat faster. What was wrong with her? Why did she feel like she was acting weird when she saw him this time? Gong Dai pursed his lips and smiled. With her back facing him, Gong Yimo couldn't see the affection and slyness in his eyes. Those wicked hands were already on her waist, gently teasing her. "Ha, Gong Dai, you're dead meat." Gong Yimo's body instantly curled up like a shrimp, and she rolled around on the bed. Gong Dai's hands were empty, and he shamelessly tickled her, just like how she used to laze around in bed when they were young. Seeing that she was about to cry from laughing, Gong Dai reluctantly stopped. However, the moment he stopped, Gong Yimo pounced on him like a hungry tiger. Her eyes flashed fiercely, and she said fiercely, "You're dead meat, Gong Dai. I'm gonna kill you. Are you afraid?" Just then, Gong Dai raised his hands high above his head. His cold voice sounded a little expectant. "Come on." It was like punching cotton. Gong Yimo angrily took out a nylon rope from her space and prepared to tie him up. Gong Dai suddenly said, "Royal sister, are you going to do those weird things to me?" He couldn't help but think of the half-burned candle and the leather whip, and he frowned slightly. He thought helplessly that if she really liked it, he would play along. How could Gong Yimo bear to touch him when he was so docile and obedient? She even had the feeling that if she took out her whip and told him to take off his shirt, he would obediently take off his pants as well. Therefore, she put the rope back and took out a lot of gadgets from her space. Gong Dai was a little nervous, although he knew that the royal sister wouldn't do anything to him. Seeing her sitting on him made him nervous for no reason. "Close your eyes," she said loftily, like a queen. Gong Dai subconsciously closed his eyes. Then he felt something cold on his eyes. What was the royal sister applying on his face? It smelled good. Gong Yimo snickered in his ears. This was a makeup she had brought from the other world. There wasn't much left. What she applied on Gong Dai's eyes was black eyeshadow. Originally, she thought that it would be ugly like a panda. However, for some reason, when she applied it on Gong Dai's face, looking at the black blur and slightly upward, it actually gave people a kind of enchanting and dark beauty. Seeing that he wanted to open his eyes, Gong Yimo hurriedly told him not to move. Only then did he behave and obediently let Gong Yimo do whatever she wanted. Gong Yimo took out the powder and lightly patted it on his overly white face. If it was a normal person, they would definitely think that it was feminine, right? However, Gong Dai's long eyelashes fluttered slightly, and it actually gave people a feeling of crystal fragility. What a strange sight. Gong Yimo took out her lipstick and lightly dipped it in her fingertips. Then, she applied it on his light-colored lips, Gong Dai's somewhat hurried breathing blue on her fingertips. Suddenly, she felt a kind of itch in her heart. It was as if someone had used a small brush to tease her heart, causing the rhythm of her breathing to be disrupted. She didn't notice this, but Gong Dai, who was lying under her, did. His hand unconsciously hugged Gong Yimo's waist. Both of them were enjoying this rare piece. The bright red color spread little by little on Gong Dai's lips. His lips were very soft. That thin warmth passed through her fingertips and into her heart, causing her heart to become chaotic at this moment. Both of them didn't speak. It was as if they spoke, something would be disturbed. Gong Dai quietly opened his eyes and looked at Gong Yimo's face, which was just inches away from him. Her breath gently blew on his chin, giving him a kind of tickling feeling. Her hair was hanging to one side, and her brows were slightly furrowed. She seemed to be doing something important. Her little mouth revealed a little bit of her pearly white teeth, and she was gently biting her lower lip. She looked really delicious. At this moment, Gong Yimo had also finished her painting. Gong Dai blinked. That black eyeshadow and red lips made him look extremely devilish and beautiful. If he were a woman, he would definitely be worthy of the title, the perfect young man with light and heavy makeup. Their gazes unconsciously collided and couldn't be separated anymore. Only then did Gong Yimo realize how intimate this distance was. She quickly wanted to retreat, but a pair of large hands had already locked onto her waist, making it impossible for her to escape. "Royal sister, what did you do to my face?" Gong Dai asked with a smile. Even if it was Gong Yimo's prank, he wasn't angry at all. Gong Yimo looked at his face and then realized what she had done in a moment of naughtiness. She smiled apologetically. "It's nothing. I just made you look a little better." "Royal sister, do you have a mirror in your hand?" Gong Dai sat up and half-hugged her. At this moment, the two of them were in a very intimate position. Gong Yimo was straddling him, while he sat up and hugged Gong Yimo's waist. No, Gong Yimo wanted to escape, but at this moment, she didn't know where to go. Her eyes looked left and right, but she didn't look at Gong Dai. However, her flushed face and bright eyes had already exposed her. Gong Dai pursed his seductive red lips and smiled. This smile was really beautiful and soul-stirring. "Royal sister, if you don't listen to me, I'll teach you a lesson." She didn't know why, but when he used such a frivolous tone to threaten her, Gong Yimo swallowed her saliva for no reason. After a desperate struggle in her heart, she finally swallowed her luck and handed over the makeup mirror from her space with trembling hands. Gong Dai carried her with one hand and used the other to look at the mirror. Gong Yimo was still foolishly smiling and saying, "It looks so good. The color of your lips is too light. It needs to be pressed with a red color like this." Gong Dai suddenly took the mirror away and looked at Gong Yimo with a slight smile. His expression was like that of a vampire in Gong Yimo's time and space, looking at her prey. "Royal sister, the color of your lips is also light." He retracted his hand and Gong Yimo's entire upper body leaned forward and bumped into his chest. Her eyes widened, and her face was full of panic. "Let me give you some color." With that said, he gently pressed his lips against Gong Yimo's lips. This kiss was separated by half a year. At this moment, her entire body was trembling slightly, as if she was afraid of something, resisting and longing for something. Her widened eyes gradually lost their luster, and then a watery light appeared. Her hands kept pressing on Gong Dai's chest. She thought to herself, "Just a moment, I'll definitely push him away." Chapter 361. The bright red lipstick carried a faint fragrance and a faint sweetness as it melted between their lips and teeth. The red color not only dyed Gong Yimo's lips, but it also followed her lips downwards, slowly dyeing her chin, neck, and collarbone red. After not seeing each other for half a year, Gong Dai's passion was enough to melt a person. At this moment, the sound of footsteps suddenly came, startling Gong Yimo. What was she doing? She came back to her senses and quickly pushed Gong Dai away. She felt that her current appearance must be very ambiguous. She used her sleeve to wipe it, but there were still faint red marks left on her body. Unsatisfied, Gong Dai wanted nothing more than to kill the person who came. What a good opportunity. This was the first time that Royal Sister did not push him away. Therefore, when the person came in, he felt that the temperature in the room was unusually low. He did not enter the inner room, but saw Gong Yimo in the outer room and greeted her respectfully. Princess Jean of Daiyu State. At this moment, Gong Yimo's heart was beating very fast. She tried her best to ask calmly, "What's the matter?" The person said a little embarrassedly, "I shouldn't have disturbed the princess's rest, but the ancestor suddenly came and wanted to see you." Gong Yimo was a little puzzled. How long had it been? He came to see her as soon as he returned? He must have brought someone to confirm her identity. Perhaps he was not sure that she was Xuelian's daughter, so he brought someone to identify her. Gong Yimo quickly calmed down. Once there was a serious matter, she could put her personal feelings aside. At this moment, she considered that her clothes were untidy, so she said to the person who came, "You go first. This princess will come after changing." "Yes." The person bowed his head and retreated. He was still thinking that the princess of Daiyu State was really beautiful. She was beautiful enough in the past, but now that he saw her, she was like a delicate flower blooming. Unfortunately, he did not dare to look any longer. Gong Yimo was thinking about something. When she returned to the inner room, she was stopped by Gong Dai before she could react. When she saw him, the fiery feeling made Gong Yimo's entire body turn red, revealing a faint pink. It was really a skin that one could not bear to part with. "Royal Sister, even now, are you still trying to escape?" He gently lifted Gong Yimo's chin with his finger, forcing her to look at him. Gong Yimo's eyes were still wet, and her gaze was slightly averted. Her rationality told her that this man had killed her in her previous life. Who knew if she would suffer the same fate as Gong Che in this life, if she liked him? However, her intuition told her that a person's mind was closely related to the environment they grew up in. She watched Gong Ju grow up, so how could she doubt his feelings? Then, she remembered the vow she made in front of the Bodhisattva in the ruined temple. She would never love anyone again. But more than that, she thought about the little things that Gong Dai had done for her. He was willing to cut his flesh and bleed for her, and he was even willing to die for her. These scenes, alternating and changing, made her head hurt. What did she want? Did she really want to do this? Seeing Gong Yimo frown and reveal a pained expression, Gong Dai's heart softened again. He was only agitated by Gong Che. He was afraid that Gong Yimo would fall in love with another man without him knowing. So, for the past 6 months, he could not wait to come here once he finished his work. If someone caught Royal Sister's eye while he was not around, even if that person was hated by Royal Sister, he wanted to kill that person. It was this uneasiness that made him want Gong Yimo to give him a reassuring answer. It was too painful to worry about personal gains and losses. But how could all of this be compared to her frown? He reached out and touched Gong Yimo's forehead. She looked up at him. Gong Dai smiled gently and sighed silently. Forget it, it's my fault. I shouldn't have forced you. He took a deep breath. I just want to tell you that I have made some achievements in the past 6 months. The Long family has fallen, and our shop has moved to Ewing. The cooperation with Yuchi is also settled. They need my support in exchange. So, my influence has infiltrated 3 countries, and it will be more powerful in the future. So, are you happy? Gong Yimo did not expect Gong Dai to do so many things in just 6 months. He was only 17 years old now. He was already much stronger than her, but he was pushing himself too hard. Are you happy? Gong Dai asked again. Just like when they were young, he was looking forward to Gong Yimo's affirmation. Gong Yimo suddenly frowned and asked, Are you happy? In his previous life, Gong Ju loved power because he was surrounded by enemies. Only by firmly grasping power in the palm of his hand could he survive. In this life, she grew up with Gong Dai. Gong Dai did not have a strong desire for anything since he was young. Sometimes he would even feel disgusted by some schemes. Then, was he happy that he had reached this step? Gong Ju's heart warmed when he heard her words of concern, and he raised his eyebrows slightly. His dark eyeliner should have been threatening, but he was so gentle in front of her. His smile was as clean as ice and snow. I'm happy. He touched Gong Yimo's face and looked deeply at the fair skin between his fingers. Royal sister and I, there is a natural distance between us. You and I are related by blood, even if I don't care. So, in order to get you, I must first gain the ability to compete with the world. So, every step forward makes me happy because I'm one step closer to you. He lowered his eyes and said slowly in a low voice, You don't have to do anything. You don't have to say anything. You just have to stand where I can see you. I will do my best to walk towards you, no matter what obstacles there are. He smiled as he said, Even you can't stop me. At that moment, Gong Yimo really had the urge to tell him the truth. Gong Ju had been enduring because she said that she didn't accept blood relatives. She was afraid that the world would hate her. However, all of this didn't exist. They weren't blood relatives at all. Even if they had children, it wouldn't matter. So, he did not have to work so hard to get her, but she could not say this sentence out loud. She had to think about it and think about it. But her hand still grabbed Gong Dai's hand that was on her face. Her palm was wet, and she was obviously nervous. Even her voice was hoarse and almost inaudible. I won't like anyone, because I once swore that I won't be moved by anyone. Gong Dai's eyes darkened and his heart ached. He wanted to hold Gong Yimo tightly, but she took a step back and let go of his hand. Gong Yimo looked at him nervously. She did not know if what she was going to do next was right, but seeing how sad Gong Dai was, she wanted to tell him this. I won't like anyone, but if I really like someone, I think that you will also be you. Chapter 362. What did it feel like to fall from heaven to hell, and then return to heaven from hell? Gong Dai didn't know what heaven and hell were, but his emotions fluctuated wildly. With one sentence from her, he instantly went from being at the bottom of the abyss to being at the top of the clouds. This turn of events made him want to give Gong Yimo a big hug. He wanted to hug her and never let her go, as if she had a premonition that Gong Dai's reaction would be very strong. When Gong Dai couldn't help but laugh, Gong Yimo opened the door and quickly ran away without changing her clothes. Gong Dai wanted to chase after her, but he remembered that he still had makeup on his face, and he was already very happy with his promise. He didn't want to force her to do anything else. Gong Yimo thought as she walked. How could she say something like that? It didn't make sense. She must have been kissed by Gong Dai for too long, causing her brain to lack oxygen. And that must be it. When Gong Yimo arrived at the main hall of the palace, she was still a little surprised. She stood at the door and tidied herself up before walking in. When she went in, she only heard a burst of crying. It was the voice of the old Wang Fei. Then she saw Long Cheng's Ting Shui's face twisted with hatred. At this moment, when she saw her, she actually screamed and wanted to rush over. It's all your fault. If it wasn't for you, why would Imperial Brother let me marry in a chopper country? You witch! She wanted to scratch Gong Yimo's face, but the old consort stopped her. Chopper Country was a small nomadic country vassal to Lu Yi. Its territory was very small, not even 1% of Lu Ye's territory. No wonder Long Chengting Shui was unhappy. But what did it have to do with her? She smiled slightly. You should restrain yourself. If you anger me, the king of Chopper Country won't be able to protect you, that's right. Chopper Country wasn't Lu Yi. It couldn't bear the anger of the princess of Daiyu State. Her words made the old consort cry even louder. Wuji, look at her. You're pushing your sister into the fire pit. Right now, Dragon City Limitless was already annoyed enough. He knew that Gong Yimo would pick on him like this, but he wanted to kill her before she could repay him. He did not believe her. In fact, with Gong Yimo's character, she would definitely not take revenge after Long Chengting Shui married into a small place like Cole. Because at that time, she would not put Long Chengting Shui in her eyes at all. So even though he hated Long Chengting Shui for doing such a thing, he still made this decision for her own good. If Long Chengting Shui continued to stay, she would once again fall into Gong Yimo's hands. He was afraid that her ending would not be like this. However, they did not understand him. You still have the face to make a scene here. It was the same for the old King Lu Yi. This was an important place in the palace, but he didn't care about his status and shouted loudly. I don't care, my daughter can't marry that kind of person. How could a king who had been chopped be called a king? The last time he brought someone to pay tribute, the old Lu Yi still remembered that it was an ordinary-looking man who was about 30 years old. His daughter was more delicate than flowers, and she was also young. How could she marry that kind of person? The noise continued. Sometimes it was Long Chengting Shui's crying, sometimes it was the old Wang Fei's persuasion, and sometimes it was the old Lu Ye's angry roar. In this noisy environment, Dragon City Limitless suddenly laughed deeply. His laughter grew louder and louder. However, it made everyone shut their mouths and quiet down. There was also a creepy feeling in their hearts at this moment. Shuizhan and the others, as well as Gong Yimo, stood there very calmly. However, Long Chengting Shui and the others were not so lucky. Long Chengting Shui suddenly felt a little regretful. She was afraid that with this mess, she would be even more miserable. As expected, after Dragon City Limitless laughed, he stared at her and said coldly, "You don't want to marry? Fine, go cultivate on Palyuo Mountain. You choose." The old Lu Yi was stunned. He wanted to say something, but Dragon City Limitless cold voice sounded. "If you want to go with her to Palyuo Mountain, just say it. After all, I, Lu Yi, will not miss out on your offerings." He actually wanted to send his parents to Palyuo Mountain. That mountain was filled with devout cultivators. There was nothing there. How were they going to survive there? Dragon City Limitless didn't seem to be joking. This made the old Lu Yi and the old Wang Fei sober up a lot. They revealed a troubled expression. Thinking about it this way, marrying the Chopper King was better than going to Palyuo Mountain, right? At least with them there, the Chopper King wouldn't be able to bully his daughter. However, going to Palyuo Mountain was equivalent to dying of old age on the mountain. Long Chengting Shui just cried. She didn't expect Dragon City Limitless to be so heartless this time, not giving her any chance. Seeing their silence, Dragon City Limitless asked somewhat cruelly, "Ting Shui, tell me now, are you going to marry?" "Yes, I'll marry." Long Chengting Shui hurriedly choked out. She was afraid that the angry Dragon City Limitless would change his mind. She was such a sensible person. However, she was very regretful. Back in Lu Yi, the Emperor of Daiyu State wanted her to choose a husband. At that time, she could have chosen anyone rather than marrying the Chopper King. Unfortunately, it was too late to regret. After sending people to send Long Chengting Shui and the others back to rest, Dragon City Limitless rubbed his forehead and looked at Gong Yimo. He was regretting it. However, at that time, he was blinded by anger. Moreover, compared to his own people's conspiracy, he was more willing to believe that it was Gong Yimo's doing. However, reality slapped him hard in the face. At the same time, he hated these people and felt even more ashamed. Therefore, he didn't dare to look into Gong Yimo's eyes. He only looked at her and said, "The divine ancestor has important matters to discuss with you. This king is going to take care of other matters." There were still more than 1,000 people who were suspected to be poisoned waiting for him to deal with. Just now, the divine ancestor gave him some holy water. Hopefully it would be useful. At this time, Gong Yimo finally looked at the so-called divine ancestor. At this time, an old woman walked out from behind him. She was standing there inconspicuously just now. Now that everyone had left, she walked shakily towards Gong Yimo. With her white hair, she gave people the feeling that she had seen the vicissitudes of life. It can't be wrong. She must be Lien Er's child. Cough, cough. After the old woman finished speaking, she coughed a few times. The divine ancestor hurried forward. It seemed that her status was higher than this so-called divine ancestor. Gong Yimo didn't deny it and bowed to her. May I ask who the two of you are? What business do you have with me? Hearing this, the old woman's face was suddenly filled with tears. If you really want to know who I am to you, then you can call me grandmother. This made Gong Yimo somewhat powerless to resist, and she spoke awkwardly. Where's the proof? How can you prove that you're related to my mother? The divine ancestor was a little dissatisfied with Gong Yimo's request for proof, but the old woman stopped him and nodded with a smile. That's exactly what I want from you. That girl Shuilian. Sigh. She's too honest. That's why so many things happen later. Chapter 363. Gong Yimo didn't care what she said. She didn't have any feelings for her mother, so naturally, she didn't care about her family. However, if she was really from the Snow Lotus clan, she would help her if she could. My mother passed away when I was very young, and she didn't say anything special to me before she passed away. So, how can I believe that you are really my grandmother? She looked like she was in a difficult position. The old woman thought for a while. Actually, it's not difficult. Our clan has a sacred stone. If you are from the Snow clan, it will definitely light up when you touch it for the first time. How could there be such a magical thing? Gong Yimo didn't believe it. However, she didn't expect the old woman to really take out a stone. The stone looked completely black. She didn't know what kind of metal it was, but it didn't look like a stone. It wasn't big, only about the length of a finger and the width of half a finger. Seeing the old woman put the stone in her palm, Gong Yimo hesitated. Would it really light up? With that thought in mind, she slowly placed her hand on the black stone. The moment her fingertips touched the strange stone, Gong Yimo felt dizzy. Then, she saw with her own eyes a faint light rise from the stone. She didn't expect it to really light up. She was shocked and quickly moved her hand away. The old woman's face showed that she knew it. She looked deeply at Gong Yimo. The passion in her eyes made Gong Yimo a little overwhelmed. Finally, I found you. My son's only daughter who is still alive. You're actually still alive? I finally found you. The holy ancestor Shuizhan comforted her from the side. This scene made Gong Yimo's heart slightly tangled. She had never had any concept of her past. She didn't know if this sudden birth was good or bad. Why didn't it appear in her previous life? After the old woman finished crying, she asked with red eyes, You are called Gong Yimo, right? How can your surname be Gong? You're from the Snow clan. As she spoke, she actually cried again. That monarch of the Yu is the enemy of our Shui clan. Not only did he destroy our country, he even stole your mother. We tried to save her time and time again, but the king of Daiyu State killed every Snow clan member he saw. So we only dared to wander around the other 3 countries, but didn't dare to go to Daiyu State. We didn't know that Lien really didn't kill you, and even gave birth to you. Gong Yimo looked at her crying, and Shuizhan seemed to disagree. It seemed that she should persuade the old lady. Gong Yimo suddenly said after hesitating for a while. Although it seems a little inappropriate to say this, the king of Daiyu State has been very good to me and my mother. I'm not his child, but as the king of a country, he didn't abort me. Although I was banished to the Cold Palace, he still treated me well after I left the Cold Palace. Although I'm not that grateful to him, I'm still grateful to him. Therefore, I will never harm him because of the grudges of the previous generation. I hope you can understand this. What did you say? Shuizhan was the first to disagree. You're acknowledging a thief as your father. Gong Yimo frowned even more. If you want to announce to the world that I'm not his child, I can leave Daiyu State. But do you want me to take revenge on him? What a joke. What's the reason? He destroyed Shui country and stole Xuelian, but personally, he didn't hurt me. Gong Yimo said calmly. I think that everyone is an individual. Parents don't necessarily owe their children anything. Similarly, children should be able to distinguish between right and wrong. They shouldn't just listen to what their elders say. They should have their own views of right and wrong and not follow what others say. You? Shuizhan wanted to say something, but the old lady stopped him. She coughed a few times and sighed. You really think so? From what you said, you should have known your identity when you were very young. Then, even though you were in the cold palace for a few years, you didn't hate him? She lifted her eyelids with great effort, as if she didn't want to miss any expression on Gong Yimo's face. In your heart, did you not hate him? Gong Yimo didn't know why, but she suddenly thought of the grudges in her previous life. Therefore, she said with certainty, no. The old lady suddenly fell silent. At this moment, even Shuizhan fell silent. It was as if they couldn't understand Gong Yimo's words. Suddenly, the old lady laughed softly. She laughed and shook her head, as if she was laughing at herself. Yes, I'm old and confused. You're very good, generous. My son's child should be so magnanimous. Madam, Shuizhan shouted in a low voice. However, the old lady ignored him. She held Gong Yimo's hand and said softly, You're right. You're right. We shouldn't force you to do anything. My name is Shuiqi, and I'm your grandmother. We haven't helped you much in all these years. So, what do you want to do in the future? Let me see if there's anything I can help you with. She panted as she spoke. Gong Yimo was really afraid that she couldn't take it anymore, so she quickly said, Don't worry. Don't worry, I can solve my own problems. The old lady smiled. You're a good child. You solved Lu Ye's problem as soon as you came. But what do you want to do next? Seeing that she kept asking, Gong Yimo sighed. Anyway, there was nothing to hide, so she told her directly. I don't want anything else. I just want the world to be peaceful and prosperous for 100 years. Her words stunned the old lady. She couldn't help but look up at Gong Yimo and said, You're a girl. Why? Gong Yimo smiled. We should do what we think is meaningful in this world. Of course, whether it works or not is another matter. Don't take it too seriously. The old lady looked down to hide the complicated emotions in her eyes. After a while, she suddenly put the holy stone in Gong Yimo's hand. Child, take it. Gong Yimo was stunned. Before she could refuse, the old lady said firmly, I'm not very capable. However, after so many years, I've accumulated a lot of connections. Ahem. Although we don't have people in Daiyu State, we have people in the other 3 countries. Now, I'll give it to you. Gong Yimo refused directly. I can't do that. I didn't do anything. I can't take your things for free. However, the old lady's attitude was even more resolute. She looked as if she was ready to die. I'm about to die. It's God's will to give you this thing. If you don't want it, I'll kill myself here. Gong Yimo took the stone in her hand gloomily. Forget it. She would just throw it in her space. She wouldn't use the people of the Shui family. Otherwise, she would owe them a favor. Chapter 364. After sending off the strange old woman and the legendary divine ancestor, Gong Yimo threw their conversation to the back of her mind. She didn't have the slightest intention of reuniting with them. Being alone was the most free, wasn't it? She tried to throw the stone into her space, but she didn't know why. She tried several times, but this strange stone couldn't be put into her space. This surprised Gong Yimo. She could see that the things in her space were still there, but this stone was an exception. She couldn't put it in? She turned the stone in her hand a few times. She guessed that it was something special. Moreover, it represented the Snow Clan. It was the sacred stone of the Snow Clan, so it couldn't be placed anywhere. She simply hung it around her waist. By the time she returned, Gongju was already fast asleep on her bed. At this time, he had already washed his face. Probably because he used a lot of strength, his face was slightly red, especially around his eyes. When he was asleep, he looked very harmless. They clearly had the same eyebrows, but the look in his eyes was different. Unexpectedly, it gave her the illusion that they were two completely different people. He was really good-looking. When she was a child, Gong Dai would fall asleep, and she would look at him and secretly think, if she had a child in the future, it would be great if he was as beautiful as Gong Dai. Wouldn't it be pleasing to look at him every day? Sitting on the edge of the bed, Gong Yimo suddenly remembered that Gong Dai said that he liked her. He also said that as long as she was willing, he wouldn't have a child. That way, they wouldn't have a deformed child. Gong Yimo gently smiled. How could they have a deformed child? There was no relationship between them at all. In her previous life, she had cut off all ties with the Gongche family very early on. She even changed her name. Later, it was revealed that she was the child of the original imperial concubine Shui, and her true identity was exposed. Because she had no relationship with Gong Cheng and didn't grow up in the palace, when she was together with Gong Che, no one said anything. In her previous life, she wanted to have a passionate love. In the end, it was passionate. But love Gong Yimo's eyebrows suddenly darkened. She originally wanted to gently stroke Gong Dai's eyebrows, but her hand also paused in midair. She thought that she wasn't afraid of anything, but it turned out that she still had a flaw and a knot in her heart. So Gong Dai thought that there was a blood relationship between them, but only she knew that there was a knot in her heart. She didn't dare to love anyone anymore. She sighed faintly and stopped her hand in midair, not daring to touch his face. In the end, she helplessly withdrew her hand. Poor Gong Dai was usually very alert, but on Gong Yimo was the one who was close to him on the bed. Of the journey, and he had been traveling day and night. All day, he just hoping to see his beloved. Of the journey was of the journey. Today, after receiving Gong Yimo's promise, his heart relaxed. Not only did he sleep soundly, but the corners of his lips were slightly raised as if he was having a good dream. Gong Yimo left the room. It was already dark, but she didn't want to sleep with Gong Dai, so she prepared to sleep in another room in the courtyard. But when she left the room, she saw Longqing Wuji standing outside hesitantly. His expression was rarely so complicated. He, who was always straightforward, was actually hesitating at the door for such a long time. Gong Yimo was afraid of waking Gong Dai up, so she signaled Longqing Wuji to go outside. Longqing Wuji had something on his mind. He didn't think that there was a man in her room. He obediently went outside with Gong Yimo. Outside, there was a wide palace road. Huacheng was the only real city in Luyi. The people here only grazed around Huacheng. They farmed and lived here. This city was built by Longqing Wuji, so it was still very young. Around it, there were people who believed in him. But today, something like this happened. There were so many people here. It was impossible to hide it. His sister and fiancé did things like slaughtering people and poisoning people. If he didn't handle it well, it was very likely that the prestige he built up over the years would collapse. It was that easy, that reality. If Huacheng also disbanded and became a place like a market, then Luyi would have no hope of becoming an emperor. So one could imagine how much pain Longqing Wuji was in now. He was clearly high-spirited before, wanting to achieve great things. But in one day, the people close to him gave him a bloody blow. Not only did it crush all his ambitions for the future, it also made the situation that he worked so hard for become precarious. But the first thing he did was to look for her. Gong Yimo secretly shook her head. If it was her, the first thing she would do was to appease the tribe leaders. But what she didn't expect was that this also proved that she had a place in Longqing Wuji's heart. Even if he wanted to kill her during the day, Longqing Wuji didn't stay up late. But now his spirit was dispirited. It was as if he hadn't slept for more than 10 days. He suddenly said something from the past. In the past, we said that when the grass is fertile, we would have a horse race. Since there's no time like the present, let's do it today. Gong Yimo couldn't deny it. Anyway, she was going to leave tomorrow. She didn't want to stay in this place that didn't believe in her. As for Gong Dai, she could leave first. After Gong Dai finished talking, she could catch up with him. Therefore, she nodded her head and decided to gallop on the land of Luyi once. Longqing Wuji quickly ordered people to bring 2 horses. The 2 of them didn't speak a word until they reached the entrance of Huacheng. Longqing Wuji looked into the distance and said, "If we keep going in this direction, we will reach the sacred lake. The sacred lake is especially beautiful at night. Whoever gets there first will win. The loser will have to promise the winner one thing. How about it?" Gong Yimo agreed. She didn't think that she would lose. Moreover, if Longqing Wuji won, he might apologize for today's matter. So if he really won, she would take it as heavens were telling her not to be calculative. "Begin." The 2 horses quickly galloped out. They were both good horses, 1 in 1,000. They were very fast. Gong Yimo felt the summer night's wind blowing through her hair. She raised her head and saw a bright moon hanging in the sky. Even the stars beside it were so eye-catching. Below them was a boundless grassland. In the night wind, the grass bent and stirred up soft and bright waves. The 2 of them shuttled through it as if they were walking on waves. Their goal was the end of the starry sky. This Lu Ye's night sky was really too beautiful. But when she wasn't paying attention, Longqing Wuji overtook her. It was as if he couldn't see the vast night sky and the bright stars. His eyes only stared ahead, as if he was determined to win. Gong Yimo frowned slightly. Then she focused and chased after him. Longqing Wuji was shocked to find that Gong Yimo's riding skills were not inferior to him, a Lu Yi man who grew up on horseback. Chapter 365. Naturally, he would not know that Gong Yimo's equestrian archery skills were honed from fighting on the battlefield. He would also not know that in her previous life, the 2 of them had fought on this grassland. He, the son of the eagle, was not a match for the executioner. But so what? The wind blew away all the memories. Gong Yimo believed that in this life, killing was already very far away from her. She no longer had to worry that one day she would wake up on the battlefield and sleep with a corpse as her pillow. She, who had a broad mind, seemed to have blended into the wind. She could easily feel Longqing Wuji's impatience, so much so that when he ran in front of her, she could see his furrowed brows. The blow he received today was too big. He was even preparing for his own wedding, but his fiancée did such a thing. Gong Yimo sighed and then slowed down. If he wanted to win, then so be it. Anyway, this Lu Yi would not be her homeland. She was about to leave, so why bother? Suddenly, a magnificent scene like the Milky Way appeared in front of Gong Yimo. In her previous life, she saw the sacred lake in the gray day. At that time, the water of the sacred lake was dyed red with blood. But in this life's night, the sacred lake she saw was like the Milky Way. It was clear and tranquil. In this kind of night, it seemed to gather all the stars, forming a sparkling Milky Way on the ground. "You lost." Longqing Wuji's soft voice came. Gong Yimo was slightly stunned and did not regain her senses. At this moment, Longqing Wuji sat on the horse and silently looked at her. His eyebrows relaxed like a silent mountain. Looking at her like this, Gong Yimo suddenly felt a trace of something called pressure. She casually spread out her hands. "If you lost, then you lost. Tell me, what do you want me to do?" Longqing Wuji jumped off the horse and extended his hand to her, as if he wanted to help her down the horse. Gong Yimo was stunned for a moment before she jumped down. She felt the slight fragrance of grass on her face. She closed her eyes comfortably and unconsciously took a few steps forward. "Is it beautiful?" Longqing Wuji's soft voice came from behind her. Here he seemed to have shed all his sharp edges. He was like a different person compared to the angry person who wanted to kill her in the day. At this time he pulled out a string of things from his arms. Gong Yi looked at them and found that they were all famous brands, but most of them were made of animal bones. Obviously, these were brands that were made for themselves by the common folk and were not recognized by Lu Yi. But Gong Yimo's sharp eyes saw a silver-branded item. That might be old Cha heirs. Longqing Wuji stepped forward. In Lu Yi, everyone's origin. Longqing Wuji squatted on the surface of the lake and looked at the clear lake. His heart seemed to have found peace. Those of high status can obtain life medallions here. Even the poor have to bathe here before they can be considered to have a new life. He looked at the nameplate in his hand and smiled. What you call a nameplate is your spoils of war. In Lu Yi, this is our life nameplate. Only those of high status are worthy of it. Once I was born, the elders of the clan would take my hair to the sacred ancestor. He would use our first strand of hair to make a life tablet that belongs to us. It can't be lost, it's one of a kind. That's why we all started from here, bathing in the first drop of water in the world. At this moment, Longqing Wuji's voice gradually lowered as he sighed. And this is also the place where life ends. When I die, my life tablet will sink to the bottom of the lake as if it had never appeared. The only thing that proves that it was here will eventually return to the lake. Don't you think it's not worth it? He threw all the name tags in his hand into the water and stirred the water. Gong Yimo then realized that Lu Ye's name tags really glowed in the water. In other words, the dazzling starlight in the lake was not a projection of the stars, but the shining nameplates in the water. This realization made Gong Yimo slightly shocked. In this lake, who knew how many lives were hidden? Years and years of accumulation. Their life's glory would finally gather here. Heroic but short. Wasn't it not worth it? She thought of what Longqing Wuji asked her. Longqing Wuji looked at the lake and smiled. So when I was young, when I threw the elders' life tablets into the lake, I thought that I must create a great achievement, so that in my short life, I would not sink into the lake, but always shine. I would live in the hearts of the future generations and pass it down generation after generation. That feeling was as if I had not only lived for a few decades, but always lived forever living like this. Gong Yimo did not know why, but from his tone, she could hear a trace of sadness. At this moment, he had already stood up and turned to look at Gong Yimo and actually smiled slightly. With this thought, I always thought that my body did not belong to me. I am Lu Ye's king, so my body, consciousness, everything about me belongs to Lu Yi, to the sky, to the people, but not to myself. What I want must be what Lu Yi wants. What Lu Yi needs is what I should do. Gong Yimo sighed and said in a helpless tone, Forget it, forget it. Don't say anymore. I'm not angry with you anymore. Your situation back then, I also understand, so don't say anymore. She also had this kind of heavy dream. It made people happy but also painful, so she did not want to listen to it anymore. Longqing Wuji suddenly could not help but laugh. Today, I did my best to win you, even if it cost my life, not to beg for your forgiveness. Gong Yimo was angry and stared at him. She was still angry. This person actually did not want to beg for mercy. Longqing Wuji looked at her. That pair of beautiful eyes. Even in this kind of night, he could see a wisp of moving blue. His voice had always been calm and heavy, but at this time, it unexpectedly had a bit of a clear and cold feeling that his age should have. He said, I hope that you can stay in Lu Yi. Gong Yimo was shocked, but before she could say anything, he had already revealed his most brilliant smile since they had known each other. Those pure white teeth and slightly shining eyes softened all the corners of his face. I want to have you. This is my selfish desire, but I have my responsibilities and mission, so I can't do that. The one I should marry is Lu Ye's goddess. But today, I suddenly want to be selfish for once. I want you because I'm happy when I think of you. It has nothing to do with any benefits. It's just the true desire in my heart. It's like riding a horse in the night. My eyes can't see anything. I can only see you. Chapter 366. Gong Yimo regains her senses and shakes her head. What kind of reversal is this? She doesn't want to play with him anymore. But when she turns around, Longqing Wuji reaches out and grabs hold of her. He stops smiling and says seriously, I want you to stay and abandon Dai State's emotional entanglements that don't belong to you. I want you to be the freest eagle in the grassland with me. I have a feeling that this is the life that suits you. Lu Yi may not be as rich as Dai State, but Lu Yi is very simple. The reason why I like you is also very simple. Don't you think that you are more suited to this grassland, to this sky. Am I more suited to you? Gong Yimo retracts her hand, as if she got an electric shock. She steps back. How are you suited to me? You even wanted to kill me during the day. Gong Yimo tries to push the grudge between the two. And Hua Zhou Wu Yu. She's your wife. Not anymore. Launching Wuji suddenly says, today, the divine ancestor came and said that she will be sentenced to death. She will use her death to comfort those who died, to redeem her sins. And when he thinks about how Hua Zhou Wu Yu dared to kill the Cha Air clan, the anger in his body could not be suppressed no matter what. He can't wait to tear her to shreds. That won't do. Gong Yimo rejects righteously. How could Hua Zhou Wu Yu die just like that? This is too strange. She frowns as she thinks. I still have a lot of things to do. I will not get married, and I will not stay in Luyi. Launching Wuji doesn't seem to care. It's okay. I will wait for you. After you finish what you want to do, I will marry you. Or you can marry me first, and we can do what you want to do together. Gong Yimo feels that this person is really stubborn. She has to be ruthless. I already have someone I like. Oh. Launching Wuji raises his eyebrows. Gong Dai. Gong Yimo nodded fiercely. Since Gong Dai was sleeping, she was not afraid that he would hear. He treats me very well. I like him very much. If I want to marry, I'm willing to marry him. Launching Wuji's eyes darkened. But you are brother and sister. The Emperor of Daiyu State won't agree. So, I still have a chance. He said these words with great difficulty. Suddenly, he frowned and sighed. Can you not reject me? This is the first time in my life that I want to pursue something that I like. You are the first person that I like. Why is it that even Gong Dai can do it, but not me? You have no chance. Gong Dai's voice suddenly sounded, causing Gong Yimo's back to stiffen. She didn't even dare to look back. She didn't dare to think about when Gong Dai had appeared there. In the end, she still turned around. When she turned around, she saw Gong Dai standing there, panting slightly. However, his eyes were clear and there was no anger. Instead, he stepped forward possessively and protected Gong Yimo behind him. He said to Launching Wuji word by word, Royal sister is mine. She has been mine since she was 7 years old. He stood in front of Gong Yimo and looked coldly at Launching Wuji. He wanted to tear him apart. So, you better not have any wishful thinking. She doesn't belong to you, and definitely doesn't belong to Lu Yi. At that moment, Launching Wuji's immature aura disappeared. The calm and domineering King Lu Yi returned. He narrowed his deep eyes and looked at Gong Dai with undisguised murderous intent. You can't keep her. She is an eagle, not a house sparrow in Daiyu State. Gong Dai looked at him coldly. He didn't back down at all. It's still better than you, Lu Yi. You have nothing. You. Launching Wuji was like a tiger whose whiskers had been plucked. He glared at Gong Dai and wanted to fight him. You are the one who is wishful thinking. She has done so much for you. You should be grateful, not let her fall into incestuousness, and be in a dilemma. This was the most painful thorn in Gong Dai's heart. His body suddenly exploded with a murderous aura. Gong Yimo, who was behind him, was scared and wanted to retreat. She is my woman. Anyone who wants to snatch her away, I will not let them off. Launching Wuji had already taken up his stance. He stared at Gong Dai like a beast staring at its prey. Then let's fight. In the grasslands, only the strong can capture a woman's heart. Gong Dai's murderous aura could not be suppressed. Gong Yimo felt that Launching Wuji was already very pitiful today. She hoped that Gong Dai would not be too ruthless. However, when she pulled on Gong Dai's sleeve, he turned around and hugged her. He gave her a fierce kiss. You always cause trouble when I'm not paying attention. Royal sister, I will deal with you later. His eyes were filled with a certain kind of heat. Gong Yimo did not dare to say anything. She stood there in a daze. Launching Wuji had already rushed over angrily. Gong Dai was also happy to fight. He had been unhappy with Launching Wuji for a long time. Seeing the two of them fighting because of a disagreement, Gong Yimo wanted to cry. What was going on? Why couldn't they just talk things out? The two of them did not use any weapons. They were fighting barehanded. It was more like they were venting their anger. Gongdai, how old are you? Can you guarantee that you will not fall in love with someone else in the future? When the time comes, what will she do? Gongdai directly punched his face and sneered. You are very good? Your fiancé is just about to be executed, and you can't wait to find another woman. Is someone like you very reliable? In terms of poisonous tongue, Gongdai was almost invincible. Longqing Wuji was about to explode in anger. When he mentioned Flower Boat Wuyo, he remembered what happened today. Then he vented all his anger on Gongdai. He swung his palm. Because of his innate strength, Gongdai retreated a few steps. His blood and chi were in turmoil. He exerted force on his feet and stopped his body from retreating. Looking at Longqing Wuji, his eyes surged, and he fiercely counterattacked. You are a despicable person. Other than taking advantage of her soft-heartedness and her past feelings, do you dare to use your strength to conquer her? Longqing Wuji took a punch from Gongdai and retreated a few steps. He almost vomited blood. However, he held it in and gritted his teeth. Gongdai stood there looking at him with disdain. A person who can't even take care of a woman's little sister has no right to say such words. Royal sister said that you should cultivate yourself and take care of the family. You have not done a single thing well. Ah, damn it. I will kill you. Longqing Wuji's eyes instantly turned red. Gongdai sneered. He clenched his fist and was ready to give him a quick death. Enough. Gong Yimo's face was gloomy. She held her forehead with one hand and angrily shouted. Hearing that she was angry, the two of them stopped. However, although Longqing Wuji's strength was great, he was not Gongdai's opponent. In the end, he was knocked down to the ground by Gongdai. He felt that he had been humiliated. He looked at Gongdai and wished he could cut him into pieces. What are you guys doing? Gong Yimo first stared at Gongdai and used her finger to poke his chest. Did you forget why you came to Luyi? He is the king of Luyi. You really hit him? Gongdai looked at Gong Yimo with a fierce gaze. Royal sister was attracting love again. He had not been pacified yet. Chapter 367. Gong Yimo was frightened by his stare and became discouraged. She then glared at Longqing Wuji. And you, Gongdai is right. You should deal with your women first. Moreover, you still have work to do tomorrow. Can you not have those weird thoughts? Longqing Wuji was not convinced. Gong Yimo, I must have you. Gongdai's killing intent exploded as he narrowed his eyes and walked towards Longqing Wuji. At that moment, Gong Yimo really felt that Gongdai was going to kill her. So Gong Yimo held on tightly to Gongdai and cried, Ancestor. You're all ancestors, okay? I'm so tired. I want to go back and rest. Gongdai thought that it would not be too late to go back and rest after killing Longqing Wuji. But Gong Yimo suddenly let go and angrily stomped her foot. Forget it. You guys can play around. I don't care anymore. Don't follow me. Saying that, she got on her horse and ran away. Seeing Gong Yimo leave just like that, Gongdai was worried that she would not continue to tangle with Longqing Wuji. So he directly got on another horse and ran towards Gong Yimo. Poor Luyi King was left alone by the sacred lake. He did not regain his senses for a long time and finally clenched his teeth. Gongdai. He did not believe that he could not win against a 17-year-old brat. The night wind blew on Gong Yimo's somewhat hot face. Just now when Gongdai kissed her forcefully, her whole body was burning up and she did not dare to face him. But Gongdai actually caught up from behind. Although she did not turn around, Gong Yimo knew that it must be Gongdai. Scary. Didn't he want to fight? Thinking of this, she hurriedly used her best riding skills to rush forward. She couldn't let Gongdai catch up to her. Gongdai's equestrian skills were also very good, but there was still some distance between him and Gong Yimo. At this moment, he saw that no matter how he chased, he was still a horse's length away from Gong Yimo. He pursed his lips and smiled. Royal sister, if you don't stop, I'm going to jump over. Gong Yimo heard his voice transmitted through his inner energy. Every word seemed to contain some kind of smile, which made her face burn even more. She wanted to run even faster. I'll count to 3 and jump over. Gong Dai's cold voice sounded again with a hint of laughter. Gong Yimo did not believe him at all. She was running so fast. Gong Dai would only do this if he didn't want his life anymore, because he couldn't jump on her horse. If he really did, he would definitely fall off the horse. Anyway, he was so strong that he wouldn't die from the fall. She wouldn't be soft-hearted. Perhaps he was deliberately scaring her to make her stop. Once, Gong Yimo hesitated for a moment. Should she slow down? If he didn't die from the fall, it would be troublesome if he broke his leg or something. 3. Gong Yimo was shocked and subconsciously pulled the reins tightly. The horse under her ran forward a few steps due to inertia before it raised its front hooves and almost flipped Gong Yimo over. Gong Dai's horse quickly brushed past her horse. Gong Dai was no longer on it. Did he really jump? Before she came to a stop, she quickly turned back to see how Gong Dai was doing. She felt warmth behind her. In this situation, Gong Dai successfully landed on her horse and hugged her. The horse had just stopped, so Gong Dai kicked it with his leg, and it started to slowly move forward. This process was too thrilling. Gong Dai almost fell off the horse if she didn't pull the reins in time. Gong Yimo panted slightly and patted her chest. Her little heart was beating very fast. After calming down a little, she turned back angrily and pinched Gong Dai's waist. Where's 2? Did you eat 2? How can you shout 1 and then 3? You did it on purpose. You scared me to death. Gong Dai took advantage of her inattention and flipped her around so that she was facing him. Gong Yimo didn't realize what was happening, but Gong Dai had already grabbed her hand tightly. She looked up and almost drowned in his bright black eyes. I did it on purpose because I knew that you would definitely catch me. You said that you like me. How can you bear to let me fall to my death? Gong Yimo couldn't help but stare at him. You deserve to fall to your death. This bastard. However, Gong Ju's big hand pressed down on her back, and her whole body fell onto his chest. Her small mouth was fiercely sucked into Gong Ju's mouth. He hugged her very passionately, and his kiss almost melted her in an instant. Their heartbeats hadn't even calmed down when they started to pound even harder. Gong Yimo felt like she was falling into a fog. Her wide eyes blinked blankly, and Gong Dai took the opportunity to deepen the kiss. The two of them kissed while sitting on the horse in such an embarrassing position. Under the moonlight in the wilderness, it was really too shameless. Gong Yimo's face turned red. It was such a hot position, and the most important thing was that the horse was still moving. It was so embarrassing. She quickly backed away and glared fiercely at Gong Dai. Fortunately, there was no one around. Otherwise, her reputation as the eldest princess of Dai Yu State's Gu country would be completely disgraced by Gong Dai. Can you stop messing around? Can you restrain yourself a little? She poked Gong Dai with her tender finger and tried to persuade him with a helpless expression. Gong Dai laughed. His voice was clear and sounded a little cold in the night, but more importantly, it sounded happy. I can't restrain myself. He actually dared to shake his head and stared at Gong Yimo. Royal sister is so dazzling. Wherever she goes, she attracts a group of wild bees and butterflies. If I restrain myself, the royal sister will be snatched away. His words didn't sound like he was wronged. Gong Yimo lowered her head in shame and tried to quibble. They're probably blinded by my intelligence, so they're using this method to keep me. Actually, I think this is a conspiracy. Gong Dai nodded repeatedly. Yes, they're all fake, but I'm real. He would never let go of any opportunity to elevate himself and suppress his opponents. Gong Yimo rolled her eyes. So, don't be so possessive. Gong Dai hugged her tightly again. He told her firmly, I won't. But his face was filled with happiness and helplessness. His royal sister would never know how dazzling she was. Those men had really fallen in love with her. How annoying. It was still better to be in the cold palace. He didn't have to worry about those prying eyes. But now, not only did he have to worry about blood relations, he also had to deal with opponents from all directions. He had to be strong. Yes, he had found another excellent reason for himself to work hard. The night was as cool as water. There were stars and wind. The two of them walked slowly like this. When they reached Luyi, Gong Yimo was already sound asleep. It couldn't be helped. After all the torment today, she was already mentally and physically exhausted. So, she fell asleep in Gong Dai's arms. Gong Dai planted a kiss on her forehead. Very good. Let's continue like this. He felt that he was about to succeed. Chapter 368. The next day, Gong Yimo was woken up by the noise outside. When she woke up, she saw Gong Dai sitting by the bed with a cold expression. He smiled when he saw Gong Yimo wake up. Royal sister, why don't you sleep a little longer? Gong Yimo rubbed her eyes. Why is it so noisy outside? She wanted to get up, but Gong Dai pressed her down and said in a serious tone, Sleep a little longer, it's still early. Gong Yimo felt that it was a little strange. At this moment, an angry female voice came from outside. Gong Yimo, you're so cruel. They were coming for her. Gong Dai secretly frowned. If it wasn't for the fact that it wasn't good to cause trouble in Liu Ye's palace, he really wanted to throw those people out. What was Dragon City Everlasting doing? He just went out to kill someone. Why wasn't he done yet? Gong Yimo couldn't lie down anymore and wanted to go out to take a look. Gong Dai said unhappily, Don't bother. This is Liu Ye's matter. It has nothing to do with us. Gong Yimo pouted. We can't just stay in the room and ignore her because of her noise, right? As she said that, she got up to take a look. Gong Dai had no choice but to follow. Although he had been accompanying Royal Sister, it wasn't like he didn't hear the noise outside. He understood that some people were unnecessary. The more you paid attention to them, the happier they would be. Gong Dai summoned a person and ordered the Imperial Guards to send 100 people to wait for orders. Then he followed. Gong Dai's action was inappropriate and could even be considered a provocation. But who asked Dragon City Everlasting to be so useless? He said that he was going to execute Flower Boat Worryless, but he still hadn't returned and wanted him to do it himself. When Gong Yimo went out, she saw a group of women. The strange thing was, just as she was wondering why Dragon City Everlasting wasn't around, she remembered that Dragon City Everlasting had sent someone to inform her that he was going to execute Flower Boat Worryless with the people from the Sacred Lake. But as soon as he left the palace, these people came in. They were too careless. Gong Yimo thought that it might be a certain little mouse that was unwilling to give up and wanted to let someone in to find trouble with her. The moment they saw Gong Yimo come out, the group of women rushed forward like crazy, as if they wanted to force her back. The leader's hand almost grabbed Gong Dai, but she was kicked away by Gong Dai. He didn't have a principle of not hitting women. There was only a difference between those who deserved to be hit and those who shouldn't. He used a bit of strength in his kick, and a large number of people behind him fell down in order to catch the girl. This was also good. Gong Yimo did not want to fight with these people. At this moment, there were only a few guards in front of her courtyard. The others had probably been transferred away. Gong Yimo couldn't help but sigh. Long Cheng's Ting Shui and the others were really forcing her to not let them off. The groaning on the ground turned into curses. Before they could get up, Gong Dai's people had already rushed in and instantly blocked the entire courtyard. Someone even brought chairs for Gong Yimo and Gong Dai to sit down and talk. She sighed. All right, now can someone tell me what's going on? Why are you making so much noise? Gong Dai's Imperial Guards separated the people one by one. Those women wearing Liu Ye's clothes stared at Gong Yimo, but couldn't move. One of them said angrily, Goddess is going to be killed by you. You can still sleep. Do you still have a conscience? Gong Yimo couldn't understand her logic and simply ignored her. She only looked at the woman who had been kicked down by Gong Dai. The corners of her mouth were stained with blood, but the way she glared at Gong Yimo was as if she wanted to eat her up. You will suffer retribution. Gong Yimo looked at her eyebrows that were similar to Huazhou Wuyo's and suddenly realized, You're Huazhou Wuyo's mother? In Liu Yi, there was no distinction between the legitimate wife and concubine. Generally, they were separated by seniority. Huazhou Wuyo was ranked 4th and was born from a concubine. She asked in puzzlement, Why are you looking for me? People who do bad things will naturally suffer retribution, but I didn't do anything bad, so I'm sitting here perfectly fine. Did you find the wrong person? Bah! She said fiercely. All of this was clearly set up by you. Wuyo is such a kind child. How could she do such a thing? You vicious woman. You must be eyeing the position of princess consort. So you set Wuyo up like this. Bitch, you'll die a horrible death. Before Gong Yimo could say anything, Gong Dai's cold gaze landed on her. Before she could say anything, an imperial guard immediately came forward to slap her. That strength was clearly not treating her as a woman. The other women who came along didn't dare to speak, afraid that they would be treated the same way. Gong Dai sneered and said to Gong Yimo, "Royal sister, Lu Ye's palace is so unruly. You're not worthy to talk to such people." Gong Yimo narrowed her eyes and sized them up. She suddenly asked, "How long have they been making a scene here?" "Almost the entire morning." Gong Dai didn't pay much attention to it. Gong Yimo turned back to look. They excitedly came here and made a scene for the entire morning, but they didn't dare to enter the door. Originally, there were only 2 guards in front of the door. She frowned. These people seemed to be deliberately looking for trouble, hoping to make me shut the door and not come out. From the looks of it, something must have happened outside. Gong Dai casually grunted. Whether something happened to Lu Yi or not had nothing to do with him. Anyway, with him here, even if Lu Yi overturned the heavens, he wouldn't be able to hurt Gong Yimo in the slightest. Unexpectedly, Lu Yi really wanted to overturn the heavens. Amidst the flames, Flower Boat Wuyo was tied to the firewood building. She looked down at the commoners who were looking at her with indignant expressions. In the next moment, she was going to be burned to death. But strangely, there was no fear on her face. Instead, she looked at the people with a compassionate expression, as if she was wronged and was going to die unjustly. Long Wuji knelt on the high platform in front of the Eagle Deity Temple. At this time, his back was exposed, and there were traces of being whipped. At this time, the whip was passed to the hands of an old man. He was one of the leaders of the Huacheng tribes. Originally, after experiencing yesterday's farce, he had thought of leaving Huacheng. But today, other than executing the heinous crime of Flower Boat Wuyo, Long Wuji also knelt down to apologize to the Eagle Deity. Moreover, on the high platform in front of the Eagle Deity Temple, he let the other leaders of the tribes who had sided with him whip him to atone for their sins. The old man sighed. In the end, the whip couldn't fall down. He knelt down, and when he knelt, all the other leaders knelt down as well. "King, this isn't your fault. Even if it is your fault, we have seen your sincerity. We won't blame you. You are still the hope of all the leaders of the tribes. Please get up." Long Wuji lowered his head and said guiltily, "No, I have failed to live up to your expectations." One was his fiancée, the other was his sister. He couldn't absolve himself from the blame. The old man sighed and stood up to help Long Wuji up. "I, Lu Ye's eagle son, shouldn't be so weak. Since you know you were wrong, you should go and correct your mistakes." As he said that, he passed a torch to Long Wuji and pointed at Flower Boat Wuyo. The old man's face was filled with resentment. "Now, you should go and burn her to death." Chapter 369. Burn her to death. Burn Huazhou Wuyu. Burn her to death. Hearing the angry voices of the crowd, Long Wuji tightened his grip on the torch and walked towards Huazhou Wuyu. "Brother Wuji, are you really going to burn me to death?" Huazhou Wuyu's eyes were filled with tears. Long Wuji nodded coldly. This was the Sacred Lake's request. If it was him, he wouldn't kill Huazhou Wuyu. At most, he would send her to Paluo Mountain to cultivate, never to leave the mountain. After all, Huazhou Wuyu was guilty. As her fiancé, he didn't notice her abnormality. He was even more guilty. However, Flower Boat Worryless was the goddess of the Holy Lake. The Holy Lake had the right to punish her. Now that the Holy Lake wanted to burn Flower Boat Worryless to death, Dragon City Everlasting had begged for mercy, but the Holy Ancestor had insisted. Seeing him nod, Huazhou Wuyu's face gradually twisted. "Then why don't you burn your sister to death? She was also involved in this matter. Why do I have to die, but she can marry someone else?" Long Wuji said softly, "This is the Sacred Lake's intention." "Sacred Lake?" Hua Zhou Wuyu suddenly gritted her teeth. That old fart. He isn't even one of Lu Ye's people. Now that he has inherited Lu Ye's sacred lake, it's fine if he doesn't help Lu Ye's people. But because of that slut Gong Yimo, he's treating me like this. When Long Wuji heard this, he felt that there was something going on. But before he could ask, Hua Zhou Wuyu's face suddenly changed. Since that's the case, then all of you can die. All of you can die. Following her words, countless troops surged out from all directions, surrounding the entire Eagle God Temple's plaza. The entire place was in a state of panic, and only Hua Zhou Wuyo was laughing loudly. If you want me to die, then all of you can die first. Her gaze landed in a corner, revealing an aggrieved expression. Brothers, save me. Long Wuji looked over, then squeezed out a few words. Hua Zhou Jinyan, you dare to betray me. Hua Zhou Jinyan, Lu Ye's great general who never missed his target. Gong Yimo had suffered in his hands before. At this moment, his face was still covered in a beard, and his expression was resolute as he spoke. I can't watch you burn Worryless to death. The moment he returned, he heard the news. Flower Boat Worryless was his most cherished younger sister. He could not let her die. Long Wuji was furious. So you betrayed me for a woman? Good, very good. Hua Zhou Jinyan did not dare to look at Long Wuji's face. Once the Hua Zhou family betrayed them, Long Wuji would be in a very passive position. This was because 1/3 of Long Wuji's power had been given to Hua Zhou Jinyan, and with the addition of the Hua Zhou family, Long Wuji would be in a very passive position. Hua Zhou Wuyo sneered. She looked at Long Wuji with eyes full of pity. Who told you to treat me like this? Cousin, don't worry, I won't kill you. I still want to marry you. At the same time, although she was still tied to the woodshed, her eyes were filled with undisguised killing intent as she looked at the panicked crowd below. But you people actually dared to disrespect me. You will all die. You will all die. Sister, Hua Zhou Jinyan shouted. Just as he was about to save her, Long Wuji laughed. Baiji Ziren, are you still not coming out? With a light cough, a young man in white walked out calmly. He was not dressed like Lu Yi, but in the Central Plains. However, everyone present was shocked when they saw him. In a short period of time, no one could mobilize too many troops. For example, Hua Cheng had 8,000 troops. 3,000 of them were given to Hua Zhou Jinyan, while Long Wuji had 5,000. However, with the Hua Zhou family's betrayal, there were many warriors in the Hua Zhou tribe. Even if time was tight, there were still 4,000 to 5,000 people. Therefore, they had the advantage in numbers. If they really caught Long Wuji off guard and killed him and the leaders of the Huaqing tribe here, their rebellion would be considered a success. But now there was Baiji Ziren, who knew how many warriors from the Baiji family he had brought with him. After a moment of panic, Hua Zhou Jinyan said in a low voice, My people have sealed off the city roads. Even if Baiji's people sneak in, there will be no more than 2,000 of them. King, you should admit defeat. I have more people than you, and all of them are brave and good at fighting. He analyzed calmly. Although time was tight, and he did not expect Long Wuji to be on guard, they still had a slight advantage. Then, what if I join in? At this time, Gong Yimo walked over with a smile. She was tall, but what was more obvious was the 2,000 Imperial guards behind her who were emitting a murderous aura. This made Hua Zhou Jinyan frown. He felt that his father was really incompetent. Didn't he say that he would force Gong Yimo to not appear? Why did she still come? In fact, he had really wronged his father. If they fought, he would not be able to win against Gong Dai and the Imperial Guards. If they exchanged benefits, he was not willing to do that to Gong Yimo, who had harmed them. Therefore, he did something stupid. He thought that Gong Yimo would not make things difficult for some weak women and children, which led to the scene in the morning. His thinking was right. However, Gong Yimo would not harm women and children, but Gong Dai did not have such principles. Long Wuji's eyes lit up when he saw Gong Yimo. The atmosphere at the scene became strange again. Hua Zhou Wuyo was a little scared. He glanced at his brother and finally turned to Gong Ju and said, Gong Ju, Gong Dai, Are you really going to help launching Wuji? He has his eyes on your sweetheart. Gong Dai turned a deaf ear. He could not be bothered to talk to such a person. Seeing that Gong Dai could not get through, Huazhou Wuyo gritted her teeth and said to Gong Yimo, Gong Yimo, a straightforward person does not resort to insinuations. I was wrong before, but as long as you help me, I promise that I will give you a generous reward. Gong Yimo did not expect the situation to take such a turn. Her eyes lit up, and she hurriedly asked, How generous? Longqing Wuji was almost angered to death when he saw Gong Yimo's greedy look. What she could give, he could not. Huazhou Wuyo did not expect Gong Yimo to be so straightforward. She frowned. Huazhou Jinyan looked at the girl who almost died in his hands and said in a low voice, Help me. When I become a king, I will marry you. When he said that, before Gong Yimo could vomit blood, Gong Dai looked over with a murderous gaze. He knew that Lu Yi was not a good person, and each of them was delusional. Shoo shoo shoo. Who cares? Gong Yimo wrinkled her little nose. Give me some real benefits. At this moment, Longqing Wuji spoke. His tone was very serious. Gong Yimo, as long as you help me get rid of them, I, Lu Yi, will provide all the horses that the Three Kingdoms Horse Club needs. Gong Yimo nodded repeatedly. Huazhou Jinyan panicked. If you help the Huazhou family, I am willing to give 3 Lu Yi border cities to Daiyu State. As soon as he said this, Longqing Wuji immediately roared, Huazhou, watch your words. You are betraying your country. Huazhou Jinyan ignored him. He only looked at Gong Yimo with a heavy gaze. In the face of great benefits, Gong Yimo should know how to choose. He knew very well that in the face of absolute benefits, all alliances could be destroyed. Gong Yimo opened her little mouth and looked at everyone in shock. She had only said it casually. Why do they all take it seriously? At this time, Gong Ju suddenly spoke. He smiled at Longqing Wuji and said in a quiet tone, I will add one more condition. As long as you can swear that you will never covet royal sister again, I will help you. Chapter 370. His eyes were cold as he asked in a serious tone, Deal? When he said that, Gong Yimo and Longqing Wuji were stunned. Gong Yimo sighed. Could he not make such a request at such a serious moment? She felt everyone's eyes on her. No matter how thick-skinned she was, she felt embarrassed. But Gong Yimo was the only one who thought that Gong Dai was joking. Everyone present could tell that he was serious. Gong Dai was not a person who could be judged purely by good or bad. If he did not agree, no one knew what he would do. Everyone thought that Longqing Wuji would agree easily. Gong Dai was an unpredictable person. If he did not agree, what if Gong Dai really helped Huazhou's family? Originally, it was fine if Gong Dai's people did not appear. Longqing Wuji felt that he might not lose. But now that he appeared, things became troublesome. You don't agree? Gong Dai raised his eyebrows slightly. That threatening tone of his made the entire place fall into a strange silence. Longqing Wuji gritted his teeth. Gong Dai, you're too despicable. Is that so? Gong Dai reached out and stroked Gong Yimo's hair. He smiled. Letting go of one person and gaining a country. You've profited, haven't you? His cold voice reverberated in the square. Gong Yimo looked at him blankly. She suddenly understood Gong Dai's intentions. He wanted to prove to her that these men were not worth her time. Everyone knew which to choose between a person and a country. But Gong Dai was different. He was the kind of person who would give up a country for one person. Only he could do that. Longqing Wuji lost. If he was a person, he would be willing to give up a country and choose Gong Yimo. But he was King Lu Yi. His people were trembling in the corners of the square. So he could not do that. At that moment, Longqing Wuji did not dare to look Gong Yimo in the eyes. He only looked at Gong Dai. Finally, he lowered his head in grief and indignation. He coldly made a gesture. Then, thank you, Prince Qi of Daiyu State, for your help. These few words were said in a depressed, angry, and helpless tone. He never knew that he could be so emotional. Gong Ju's lips curved into a smile, and he nodded with satisfaction. No need to be so polite. Gong Yimo watched them come to an agreement, and was speechless. But she did not want to have any emotional entanglements with others, so she did not say anything. Seeing that Gong Dai and Longqing Wuji had formed an alliance was very disadvantageous for the Huazhou family. But a rebellion was a rebellion. Now that they were riding a tiger, they could not back down. It was better to fight. Coincidentally, he, Huazhou Jinyan, was also looking forward to a fight with Gong Dai. The people from both sides kept pouring into the square from two different directions and started to fight. Gong Yimo originally wanted to join in, but as soon as she drew her sword, Gong Dai frowned slightly. In the midst of the chaotic battle, he carried Gong Yimo up to the wooden house like a fragile porcelain doll. This is a man's business. Royal sister, just watch. With that, he jumped down himself and joined in the fight, tangling with Huazhou Jinyan. Gong Yimo was still a little stunned when he put her up to the wooden house. Whether it was in her previous life or this life, she was used to charging and breaking through enemy lines. She was used to doing everything herself and fighting at the forefront. But Gong Dai's actions made her feel like she was being protected, as if she was powerless and only needed to watch. She did not know why, but this feeling was not bad. Below, there were sounds of fighting. The people in front had fallen, but there was still a steady stream of people pouring into the square. Gong Yimo looked at these people fighting and did not feel anything. After all, she had seen many of them, and many things were not as simple as they seemed on the surface. The root of the problem seemed simple, as if it could be solved just by sitting down and talking. But in reality, the reason for the current situation was because of hidden dangers that had been buried a long time ago. That was why there would be a day when it would explode. It was not just on the surface. She did not understand Liu Ye's situation, but the way the Huazhou family wanted to monopolize the horse ranch must have crossed Longqing Wuji's bottom line from the beginning. It was just that he had held back, and Longqing Wuji was already prepared. He had notified the Baiji family in advance to help. Clearly, the tripartite situation of the three big families had collapsed. From this point, it could be seen that the simple Liu Yi had a complicated side that was not inferior to the Daiyu state. It was too noisy below. Gong Yimo turned to look at Huazhou Wuyo, who was still tied up on the duga. She touched her chin and said, "You did not die in vain. So many people will be buried with you." But at this moment, Huazhou Wuyo was not calm at all. She stared at the battle below anxiously. She did not have the calmness that Gong Yimo had. The smell of blood and the sounds of fighting were the most provocative. It could also make people nervous or excited. Huazhou Wuyo was very nervous. Her face was pale, and her forehead was covered in cold sweat. "I don't want to die. I won't die. The warriors of the Huazhou family will not lose. I don't want to die." But as she said this, she saw with her own eyes that someone she knew from the Huazhou family was killed by the Baiji family. She could not help but scream. It was as if the knife was cutting her. Blood splattered 3 feet. Gong Yimo saw this and could almost feel the heat of the blood. In the past, she had been fighting in close combat. This was the most familiar feeling. But now, she was sitting here without any blood. She was not used to it. No, the Huazhou family will lose. Gong Yimo analyzed the situation coldly. Although the Huazhou family was very brave and had more people than the Baiji family and Longqing family, they had Gong Dai. Even if the people he trained were few, they would still have an overwhelming advantage at this moment. Not to mention the endless stream of people who came to protect them. Without the advantage of being caught off guard and having the advantage of numbers, the Huazhou family was destined to lose. At this moment, Huazhou Wuyo also looked at the place where Gong Dai and the others were. There was almost a vacuum there. Her eyes turned red, and she was speechless for a long time. "You are really lucky." After a while, Gong Yimo heard Huazhou Wuyo's voice. "Gong Dai loves you so much, and there are so many people protecting you. I still remember how Gong Dai forced the shop owner's family to be on guard in the middle of the night, so that you could eat a sweet biscuit that you liked." Gong Yimo was stunned. She did not remember what Huazhou Wuyo was talking about. That incident was actually the first time Huazhou Wuyo was caught by Gong Dai. She was jealous of Gong Yimo. But wasn't this jealousy also a form of envy? Huazhou Wuyo cried when she saw that the Huazhou family was gradually defeated. Her brother's bloodthirsty eyes could not save them. She suddenly regretted doing such a thing for her own selfish reasons. The Huazhou family's rebellion was premeditated by her father, but her brother's rebellion was really for her sake. Chapter 371. But now, seeing that the Huazhou family was on the verge of collapse, she could not say a word to persuade them. Actually, if she said one word, her brother would definitely listen to her. Surrendering was better than so many people dying, but she just could not say it. She was afraid of death. Long Qingwuji and the rest gradually gained control of the situation. Under the overwhelming advantage, many of the Huazhou family members surrendered. Huazhou Jinyan's thigh was cut, and he could not stand up again. Long Qingwuji panted slightly, then sent a team to the Huazhou family to clean up the remnants. Looking at the corpses on the ground, Huazhou Wuyo could not help but burst into tears. She looked at Gong Yimo with hatred. This is all your fault. If not for you, I would still be a goddess. Perhaps I would have become a princess. Why did you do this to me? Sometimes people were so strange. She did not think about what she had done or how many people she had killed. She only felt that she had been forced to this point by others. But was it really because others had forced her? It was her own choice. Gong Yimo jumped down from the firewood tower. At this moment, around the square, the weak clansmen were hiding in the corners looking over. They watched as Gong Yimo took out a fire starter and looked calmly at Huazhou Wuyo. You should ask the king of hell this question. Huazhou Jinyan saw this, and his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. But because of his serious injuries, he could not move. He only had time to scream, Wuyo! But no matter how unwilling, sorrowful, and angry he was, the fire starter fell on the firewood that had been drenched in oil. It jumped and rolled down, but the flames immediately rose. Huazhou Wuyo screamed. There were so many dead people on the ground, and those kneeling on the ground. Not a single one of them came to save her. Gong Yimo! Gong Yimo! You will die a horrible death. She looked at all this in horror, screaming and cursing. The moment the heat wave hit, death approached. At that moment, she broke down. Gong Yimo glanced at her, then turned around and walked towards Huazhou Jinyan with a smile. Huazhou Jinyan's thigh had been cut, and he could not move at all. He could only crawl towards the fire, shouting no continuously. Worryless, worryless. Being burned to death was very painful. That kind of burning pain seemed to slowly burn one's soul. Gong Yimo picked up a bow and arrow, then stood in front of Huazhou Jinyan. He looked up blankly. Last time, he had almost killed this woman with an arrow. But it had only been a short time. This woman had grown to such a level. She held such a high position and wielded so much power that she could decide the outcome of a country. As for him, he was lying on the ground like a dog, looking up at him. Gong Yimo threw the bow in front of him. Pick it up. As she said this, Huazhou Wuyo's screams came from behind her. The fire had already reached her skirt. Her panicked and terrified voice deeply touched the nerves of everyone in the square. There was a burning smell in the air. She kept cursing Gong Yimo. It was all her fault. She did not want to die. She did not want to be burned to death. If you don't want to see your sister die so painfully, you have another choice. Pick up the bow and use your superb archery skills to give her a quick death. Gong Yimo looked at Huazhou Jinyan with a smile. At this moment, she was like a demon, but the corners of her lips curled up slightly. She was clearly demonic, but there was no evil in her at all. She wanted him to kill his sister? No, he could not. Huazhou Jinyan pushed the bow and arrow away, but Huazhou Wuyo's painful screams made him hesitate. He had to save her. Save her, not kill her. Gong Yimo, you will die a horrible death. Ah, you will die a horrible death. Thousands of arrows will pierce your heart. You will be torn apart by 5 horses. Gong Yimo heard the curses behind her and the crackling of the firewood. She opened her eyes and revealed her white teeth. She made a gesture towards Huazhou Jinyan, which was to reach out and swipe her throat. She had done this gesture to Huazhou Jinyan when she had escaped from his arrow. As long as you can pierce her throat with one arrow, then she will die immediately. She will not have to suffer the pain of being burned by the fire. Also, as long as you don't miss, I promise you that I will bury her ashes in your Huazhou family's graveyard, and no one will care about it. As long as you shoot her throat. Huazhou Jinyan looked at Gong Yimo in disbelief. However, he did not see anything on Gong Yimo's face. She was taking revenge for the 2 arrows from back then. She was forcing him to kill the person that he would rather rebel to protect. The screams continued, and the fire made the entire place hot. No one spoke, and no one stopped her. She was just so unscrupulous as she asked him to do this. However, when she said these words, there was not a trace of cruelty in her expression. Instead, there was pity, as if she was forgiving. Wasn't that pity and forgiveness? Huazhou Wuyo's screams became more and more pitiful. The fire burned her skin, and she wished she could die immediately. Ah, Gong Yimo, I curse you, curse you. She cried and laughed, cursing like a crazy demon. Her painful screams finally made Huazhou Jinyan grab the bow and arrow. Gong Yimo saw that he had grabbed the bow and arrow. She smiled and moved aside, allowing him to see his sister's pitiful state. The fire burned Huazhou Jinyan's dress and burned her body. It could be said that she was begging for death. Huazhou Jinyan's hand that was holding the bow and arrow was trembling. He hated how these people could be so cruel. His sister was arrogant, noble, and beautiful. She should not be burned in the fire, forcing him to kill her personally to end the pain. Why was it that the one dying was not someone else? Gong Yimo saw the hatred in his eyes. Her ghostly voice instantly dispelled all of Huazhou Jinyan's thoughts. You have to think carefully. There's only one arrow. If you use it to shoot someone else, then you can watch Huazhou Wuyo burn to death. It's that simple. Her words made Huazhou Jinyan's heart turn to ashes. He sat on the ground. On one side was his screaming sister, and on the other was the person he wanted to kill the most. At such a close distance, he could directly kill Longqing Wuji or kill Gong Yimo, but the fire had already burned Huazhou Wuyo. If he killed these people, then Huazhou Wuyo would welcome her most tragic death. Revenge, or to give his sister relief. He had never felt that the bow in his hand was so heavy. He finally aimed at Huazhou Wuyo's neck. At this moment, Huazhou Wuyo was in extreme pain. Her resentful eyes entangled with Gong Yimo. Her eyes were bleeding. Every word was like the most vicious curse from the depths of hell. Gong Yimo, I use my life to curse you. You will be betrayed by the person you love the most. You will suffer the most extreme punishment in the world until you die. You will never be reincarnated. After saying this, her head suddenly tilted back. Her upper body was nailed to the wooden stake behind her by her own brother with an arrow. She died with her eyes wide open, but she no longer had to endure the pain of being burned by the fire. This was good, very good. Gong Yimo saw Huazhou Jinyan's bow fall to the ground. His hands were trembling. She could not help but smile. This arrow had actually killed 2 people, Huazhou Wuyo and himself. There would no longer be a master archer, Huazhou Jinyan. She had avenged the 2 arrows from back then. Wasn't this all very convenient? Chapter 372. With Huazhou Wuyo's death, this matter was settled. What Li did next had nothing to do with her. She could prepare to go back. However, Gong Dai refused to let her go. He insisted that she stay and go with him. In Gong Dai's eyes, the royal sister was too jumpy. He had to keep an eye on her. Gong Yimo stayed with resentment. She had no choice. She had to watch Longqing Shui get married. In order to appease the people, Longqing Wuji had to cut the Gordian knot and let Longqing Shui get married as soon as possible. Otherwise, once the matter was settled, Longqing Shui would have to suffer. Therefore, no matter how reluctant they were, the old Lu Yi king and the old Wang Fei were beaten by Longqing Wuji. They became well-behaved and began to prepare a dowry for Long Chung Ting Shui. Gong Yimo saw this and was happy in her heart. This was because she knew very well what kind of person Chop Wang was. He looked very honest and kind, but he was the only homosexual she knew in this world. This was something that her subordinates had told her as a joke. They said that the king of a small country didn't love beauties but loved men. It wasn't that he didn't abstain from meat and vegetables, but that he was only interested in men. Moreover, it was said that he was a virgin. If Long Chung Ting Shui married over, she would also be a widow. However, she wouldn't say these things out loud. More than 1,000 lives. Well, Gong Yimo wasn't just because of those people. Long Chung Ting Shui had disgusted her so many times. She deserved to be disgusted for the rest of her life. She thought mischievously. She rubbed her chin. Recently, she seemed to be a bit angry. Not good, not good. Therefore, in such a chaotic atmosphere, Long Chung Ting Shui got married. The Chopper King personally came to Lu Yi to pick her up. They were travel-worn and couldn't bring anything. Therefore, the old Lu Yi king and the old Wang Fei prepared a lot for them to take away. Therefore, it could be considered a grand wedding. Last time, Long Chung Ting Shui was harshly reprimanded by Long Chung Wuji because of the Hua Zhou family. That was why she was very well behaved on the day of her wedding. Although others might think she was glamorous, only she knew how she felt on the inside. Gong Yimo also saw Chopper King. He was about 30 years old and looked ordinary. Naturally, he was not liked by the old Lu Yi, so the old Lu Yi pulled him aside and nagged at him. Rather than calling it advice, it was more like a warning. The pitiful man listened obediently and was lectured like a grandson. Gong Yimo secretly pulled Gong Dai's arm and whispered to him, "Look, that's the little show I told you about. You know what little show is, right? I've explained it to you before. Don't look down on him just because he's weak. He's completely under the control of the old Lu Yi king. Little show is very powerful. Just you wait. When Long Cheng's Ting Shui arrives, she'll definitely be suppressed by little show. She won't be able to be arrogant." Gong Ju listened with a smile, but in his heart he felt strange. His sister seemed to know everything. What was the reason for this? The palace was very lively. After the banquet, Long Cheng's Ting Shui was about to leave with Chopper King's people. If they were in Daiyu State, they would definitely be laughed at for leaving in such a hurry. When they left, everyone stood up and sent Long Cheng's Ting Shui to the gates of Hua City. From today onwards, she was no longer Lu Ye's most favored little princess, but a princess of a small country. The difference in status was not ordinary. When Long Cheng's Ting Shui left, she kept looking back, as if hoping that Long Cheng's Wuji would change his mind. At the city gates, Long Cheng's Ting Shui hugged the old princess and cried. Her reluctance to part was very moving. Long Cheng's Wuji stood at the city gates and looked at them without saying anything. In any case, she was definitely getting married today. Perhaps only when she got married would Lu Yi be able to live peacefully for a few days. At this time, Gong Yimo was also on the city walls. There were only the two of them up there. Looking at the wedding procession below, they felt like they were putting the blame on others. Gong Yimo sighed and then stretched out her hand. In her palm was a silver medal with Long Cheng's Wuji's name engraved on it. It was his life medal. Now that Hua Zhou's family has fallen, and Long Cheng's Ting Shui, who has always disliked me, is also married, Lu Yi is still quite safe. I'll return this medal to you. She said it with a relaxed face. Long Cheng's Wuji looked at the small medal in her palm, but did not say anything. Take it. Gong Yimo slightly raised her eyebrows and giggled. Are you going to give it to me? That's not good, right? She pretended to be shy. Only then did Long Cheng's Wuji smile and take the medal from her hand. But before Gong Yimo could say anything, he used his height advantage and hung the life medal around her neck. This made Gong Yimo stunned. What are you doing? Gong Yimo asked in confusion. This was Lu Ye's life medal, which represented the king. Why would he give it to her? Long Cheng's Wuji looked at her and said in a low voice, This life medal represents me, Long Cheng's Wuji. Rather than one day, it will sink into the sacred lake and never see the light of day. I'd rather it be hung around your neck and buried with you. Gong Yimo laughed when she heard this. What if I want to be cremated? Wouldn't the only evidence of your existence in this world be cremated with me? Who knew that Long Cheng's Wuji actually looked at her seriously? How fortunate is it to be fused with life and death? The afternoon sun shone on Long Cheng Wuji's face. His expression was firm and sincere, just like the sun, unswervingly shining wherever it was. It was also like the huge Yellowstone city gate beneath him, eternally steady. He was the king of Luyi. He had no selfish motives, but he also had selfish motives. Even though he promised Gong Dai that he would no longer peek at Gong Yimo's thoughts, he still hoped that this thing that represented him could always be by her side. Gong Yimo smiled faintly. She took down the life medal, stood on her tiptoes, and gently hung it around Long Cheng's neck. Back then, she had used a finger to take it away so frivolously. Now, she was giving it back so solemnly. I'm very happy that you think so highly of me, but I can't do this. This life medal belongs to your princess, and more importantly, it belongs to the sacred lake. Your roots are here. You are here. Your heart should also be here. It should not follow me to a foreign place. Long Cheng's Wuji's eyes flashed with a trace of pain. Even this little bit of thought is not allowed. Gong Yimo smiled. Do you still remember what you said? You said you want to make a contribution, live in people's hearts, verbally, and pass it down for generations. And I can also live in your sea of consciousness. What difference does it make whether I have this life medal or not? At this moment, a burst of music sounded. Long Cheng's Ting Shui was about to leave. The bridal procession on both sides blew the horn, and then played the four-stringed instrument to send the bride off. The sound of the four-stringed instrument was very pleasant and melodious, with a simple and mysterious aura of the grassland. Gong Yimo was immediately entranced and murmured, "Your country is a very outstanding country, and its people are also outstanding people. It should be like this four-stringed instrument, and continue to develop endlessly. And you are the one who will open the new door, their leader and spiritual pillar." Her expression gradually became serious. You are very important. Just as you said, you are Lu Ye's king. You don't belong to yourself, but you belong to them. Don't you think it's very meaningful? To be able to bear the will of so many people, to create an immortal foundation. What a delightful and fulfilling thing. Long Cheng's Wuji suddenly laughed. That laughter was very hearty and also very happy. Finally, he stopped laughing and looked at the people who followed him under the city gate and said softly, "Yes, I belong to Lu Yi, and I am happy for it. I have a lot, but..." He looked at Gong Yimo's side profile. "But I can't have you." Chapter 373. By the time Lu Ye's matters were all settled, it was already more than 10 days later. Gong Dai and Yu Hing's envoy sat down to discuss the Three Kingdoms horse farms. Because Lu Yi was willing to provide the horses of these 18 horse farms, this matter went very smoothly. Gong Dai also made a request. He was willing to send people to clear the road across the Three Kingdoms, but he hoped that all the relay stations of these 18 horse farms would belong to Gong Yimo. Lu Yi had already agreed, so naturally he had no objections. When Yu Hing's people heard that it was for the princess, they happily agreed. This matter was considered a preliminary agreement. As for the laws and regulations, they still needed to go through further negotiations. However, this first meeting was done and sealed. After these matters were settled, it was time to go back. Gong Yimo was preparing her luggage when the door rang. It turned out that Yu Hing's envoy was requesting an audience. Gong Yimo had seen this person before. "Greetings to your highness." Gong Yimo smiled very amiably. "What business do you have with me?" That person quickly explained, "The second prince has a message for you. His Highness said that he wants to thank the princess for helping him when he was passing by Yu Hing last year. It was because of this that he was not so passive. However, His Highness is currently busy with the coronation, so it is inconvenient for him to personally thank you. He hopes that when you pass by Yu Hing on your way back, you can attend His Highness's coronation ceremony." Gong Yimo smiled. "It's finally time for the coronation. Why did it take so long?" That person replied, "When His Highness returned to the country, there were still some remnants causing trouble, such as an of Scylla. They caused trouble because of His Highness's background, so it took some effort to eliminate them. Gong Yimo nodded. I see. I will definitely attend Kim Yoon Gij's coronation ceremony. Please pass on a message that I will definitely be there. That person's face was full of smiles. Then this foreign subject will not disturb you. I believe that His Highness will be very happy with this news. Gong Yimo smiled. Go ahead. After they left, Gong Yimo sighed. This Yuhun was finally done. Lu Yi also seemed to have a lot of things to do. However, since there was nothing for her to do, it was time to leave. On the day of his departure, everyone in Hua Cheng came to see him off. Last time, they had wronged Gong Yimo and felt very embarrassed. She was a person from Dayu State, and she had put in so much effort to help them solve their grain problem. However, they still doubted her and almost caused her to die under the blade of their king. Gong Yimo did not take it to heart. The situation at that time was very normal. Anyway, the main culprit was dead, so she would not bother about it. Gong Dai was even more direct. After bidding farewell to the palace, he quickly left, as if he did not want to stay in Hua City for another second. Therefore, the group of people left Hua City under the escort of the people. Dragon City's Wuji did not come out to see them off. This was good, as it would save them from being sad when they parted. After leaving Hua City, Gong Yimo felt her body lighten. She looked at Gong Dai and said with a smile, Gong Dai, does Imperial Father know that you brought so many soldiers with you? Gong Dai said lightly, they are not soldiers from the Imperial City. Seeing that Gong Yimo did not understand, he pursed his lips and smiled. After leaving Lu Ye's Hua City, he was in a good mood and smiled more often. They are soldiers from the West Province. Back then, Imperial Father gave me 30,000 soldiers in the West Province. They are private soldiers that I secretly trained. Gong Yimo was slightly speechless. Gong Dai was really daring. Even if the military power was in Gong Dai's hands, this kind of private mobilization of soldiers was a big crime. So they will return to the West Province directly from Lu Yi? Gong Dai nodded. When the time comes, there will only be 100 or so people returning to Dayu State with us. Gong Yimo could not help but admire Gong Dai's foresight. Fortunately, he had mobilized the soldiers, which saved them a lot of trouble. At this time, it was the time when everything in Lu Yi was growing. The grass was green and the breeze was refreshing. At this time, a melodious sound suddenly came. Gong Yimo listened and saw that it was the sound of a piccolo, who was playing a farewell song on her way to leave. Gong Yimo turned around and saw Dragon City's Wuji. He was riding alone on a horse and playing the flute. In her previous life and this life, she did not know that Dragon City's Wuji could play the flute and played it so well. However, Gong Dai was not happy. He looked at Dragon City's Wuji. Is King Lu Yi here to send us off? Dragon City's Wuji looked at him openly. I will keep my promise, but there are a few words that I want to say only to Gong Yimo. Gong Dai narrowed his eyes and looked at him. There was a trace of impatience on his handsome face, but when he looked at Gong Yimo, it turned into a sigh. He led his men and urged their horses forward a few steps so that the two of them could have some space to speak. It was not that he was gentlemanly, but he knew that the royal sister did not like to be tied down. Moreover, the royal sister had a good heart, and Dragon City's Wuji was a man who kept his promises. Although he felt that it was troublesome, he still gave him a chance. Perhaps this would be the last time Dragon City's Wuji would see the royal sister. Dragon City's Wuji had the same thought. This might be the last time he would see Gong Yimo. No matter how powerful a woman was, she would still get married. Once she got married, she would no longer be able to fly around like an eagle. Therefore, he let himself be. For the first time, he looked at Gong Yimo in a daze, as if he wanted to imprint her appearance deeply in his mind. No matter how harsh the years were, it would not be able to erase her appearance. Immerse. He smiled. This was also the first time he called her that. It was 3 parts careful and 7 parts painful. He had nothing to say. He picked up his flute again and played a farewell song. It was said that a song could touch a person's heart. The lingering feelings, happiness, pain, and sorrow of parting seemed to be expressed through this song. Gong Yimo sighed softly. Parting was something that was hard to get used to no matter how many times she experienced it. But the song had to end, and people had to part. When the last note fell, Dragon City's Wuji urged his horse forward. The moment the two horses drew close, he reached out his hand towards her and cut off a strand of her hair. Gong Yimo was stunned. She asked, "What are you doing?" At this moment, Dragon City's Wuji had already placed the strand of hair back into his arms. Looking at her, those beautiful deep blue eyes were filled with tenderness and forbearance. "The divine ancestor has already promised me that I can use your hair to make a life tablet." Gong Yimo was puzzled. Didn't they say that only fetal hair could be used? Why was it possible to use strand of hair now? But this was not the main point. She asked blankly, "What do you want my life tablet for?" She blinked her eyes in confusion. Her small face was smooth, and her eyes were clear. No matter how many times he looked at them, Dragon City's Wuji felt that her eyes were wider than the sky and cleaner than the sacred lake. He sighed softly. "I will link your life card with my life card. Because even if I create an immortal foundation, I will still grow old and die. My life tablet will still sink into the sacred lake. And when that day comes, I only hope that the name that will be entangled with my life tablet and sink into the lake together will be you." He took a deep breath and laughed towards the sky. "It is already impossible in this life. Perhaps this way, I can look forward to being entangled with you in the next life." This affection was heavy. At that moment, Gong Yimo felt as if she could not breathe. Dragon City's Wuji looked at her greedily. Perhaps this would be the last time in his life that he could chase after what he wanted. The last time that he could follow his heart. In the end, the strongest man in the grasslands, the bravest eagle's son, actually choked up slightly in front of her. At this moment, I actually feel that being remembered by the world cannot be compared to you remembering me. He smiled. The bitterness in his smile did not suit him at all. "Take care. No matter if we meet again or not, please do not forget Lu Yi and I, Dragon City's Wuji." Gong Yimo lowered her head and said softly, "I will not forget you. Goodbye." After saying that, she did not dare to look at him again. She urged her horse and left, leaving behind a back view on the grasslands. The sun shone brightly that day. It was actually so dazzling. Chapter 374. Tomorrow would be Gong Yimo's 18th birthday. Gong Dai watched as Gong Yimo half knelt on the grass to wash her face. The gurgling water was very shallow and very clear. Under the sunlight, the sparkling water splashed and sparkled. It was a different kind of seductive sight. At this time, Gong Dai's private army had already taken another route from Lu Yi back to Shizhou. There were only about 100 of them walking on the grassland. It would probably take another 2 or 3 days before they could leave Lu Yi. This made Gong Dai feel a little troubled. How could he celebrate Royal Sister's birthday in this place where there were no villages or shops? Gong Dai grew up under the influence of Gong Yimo. Naturally, he also understood that it was different from what his teachers taught him. There were many men who got married at the age of 12. However, in Royal Sister's mind, it seemed that one would only be considered an adult at the age of 18. Gong Dai calculated. He would be 18 in half a year, so he would be considered an adult, right? However, he had prepared a birthday gift, and Royal Sister would definitely like it. At night, a group of people began to set up camp. Unlike winter, although Lu Yi also had a Kong bed, the thing that they used to make fires was very special. It burned animal feces for warmth. Although it made the best use of everything, it also made the house smell very strange. Fortunately, the palace did not have such a smell. It had to be said that whether it was Lu Yi or Yu Heng, they were all trying their best to become Chinese. Perhaps one day in the future, someone would unify the 4 countries? Gong Yimo smiled. However, if one wanted to unify the 4 countries, it was usually through war. She probably would not be able to see it in her lifetime. The sky darkened. The stars on the grassland lit up one by one. There was still a trace of orange and purple on the horizon that had not faded. There were already stars above her head. Gong Yimo lay on the grass with her arms and legs spread out. It was really comfortable to lie like this after eating. Gong Dai sat beside her. In the end, he couldn't dissuade Gong Yimo and lay down as well. The 100-odd Imperial Army soldiers were definitely doing what they were supposed to do. They didn't even dare to look over here. Furthermore, the grass was a little tall. From the angle where they were lying down and setting up camp, they really couldn't see what they were doing. Gong Yimo chuckled when she saw Gong Dai's uneasiness. Ever since he was young, Gong Dai loved cleanliness. Lying on the ground like this was actually a very difficult thing for him, right? Don't you think it's cool and comfortable? Gong Dai turned his head and saw Gong Yimo snickering. It had been like this since they were young. As long as he felt uncomfortable, the royal sister would be happy. Thinking of this, his handsome face became even more helpless. Looking into his eyes, there was an indescribable doting. The light from the fire shone from afar. Their vision wasn't very clear, but they were very close. Their breaths were almost intertwined. Gong Emo used the starlight and firelight to look at him. She only felt that in such a blurry state, Gong Ju's sharp aura had diminished a lot. He looked more handsome, and his coldness retreated, making him appear very gentle. What's wrong? Being stared at by Gong Yimo like this, he was actually a little embarrassed. That special voice came out from his thin lips. Hearing it in this kind of night, it was especially seductive. Gong Yimo smiled, but didn't say anything. The more she looked at Gong Dai, the more she felt that he was very good now. Beautiful eyes, a high nose, and thin but stylish lips. But the knot in her heart couldn't be untied. Thinking about it, Gong Dai was quite wronged. He actually had to pay for something he didn't do in this life. But who asked the person she met in both lives to be Gong Dai? Feeling Gong Dai holding her hand and asking again, Gong Yimo smiled and said, I read a little fable when I was young. Do you want to hear it? Gong Dai was stunned. Then he moved closer to her, indicating that he was willing to listen. When he was young, Gong Yimo would always teach him some principles through stories she read in books. Even if she didn't have any experience, who would say that she didn't do well? Gong Yimo thought for a while and said, There was a woman who wanted to jump into a river. Then a boatman saw her and hurriedly rowed the boat over to ask for the reason. The woman said that she came here on a boat 3 years ago. She married a good man and thought that she would live a happy life. In the end, she found out that she was used by her husband. After being used, she was persecuted by his concubine and was abandoned. In a short 3 years, she had nothing. In grief, she wanted to end her life. When Gong Yimo said this, she spoke very slowly. Her eyes were staring blankly at the sky. The emotions in her eyes made the sensitive Gong Dai frown slightly. He suddenly felt that what she was going to say was very important to him. Gong Yimo continued. After the boatman heard this, he didn't say a word. He only let the woman get on the boat. He took the woman around the lake and sent her ashore. The woman didn't understand. The boatman smiled and said, Now you have returned to 3 years ago when you first came here. You also have nothing, but if you continue to live, you will have a lot. This was originally an inspiring prophecy. The meaning of it spread was to guide people to let go of their pain and find happiness. For some reason, when Gong Yimo finished this story, her expression was slightly perplexed. Then, she asked, The story ends here. But what do you think will happen to the woman after she is sent back? Gong Dai's heart suddenly trembled. He suddenly felt that this story was very likely to be the deepest knot in Royal Sister's heart. But why? Gong Dai was deep in thought. Gong Yimo said again, Do you think she will listen to the old man and let go of everything? Nothing happened back then and start anew? Or will she wait for the old man to leave and continue to seek death? If it was in the past, Gong Dai would definitely say that the woman would die. Because many things, many happiness, after obtaining them, were bloody exposed and told that it was all an illusion. The truth was that she was used and then abandoned. How could that kind of pain be erased with just a few words? After all, the deeper the love, the deeper the hatred, not to mention other things. Even if the woman really returned to 3 years ago, it was still a question whether her scarred heart could hold on. So, he felt that the woman would definitely die. If she could get over it so easily, she wouldn't have appeared by the lake to seek death. Why would Royal Sister suddenly ask this question? What if the woman was Royal Sister? A strong person like her would definitely not seek death. But how would she continue to live? A faint light flashed in his mind. But before he could grasp it, Gong Yimo shook his hand and asked, "You haven't answered me." Looking at the beautiful face in front of him, Gong Dai unexpectedly said, "Since there is a chance to start anew, then it must be anew." Maybe the boatman was really a deity and allowed her to return to 3 years ago? Gong Yimo heard this and thought for a while. She suddenly turned around and leaned closer to him. She looked seriously into Gong Dai's eyes and finally said, "Gong Dai, you're lying to me. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.